everyone. Welcome to Shadows Around the Firelight. Tonight we have a big episode. There's a lot to cover. First, we will be talking about the triat. It's a subject that is covered in the game that we've been playing for several weeks now, Heart of the Forest. But there's a lot left unsaid about the triat, and last week I promised that I would start with that and explain a little bit more about the three members of the triat, the history which has led us to where we are, at least spiritually speaking. Why is the worm such a problem, and why is actually the Weaver about as bad? And why is actually the Wild about as bad as well? I've touched a bit on that in the past in terms of blanket statements in a previous episode, and the worm being the big bad is one of them. The more you read, the more you figure out that yes, but also there's more. We're also going to be talking about a lot of news, recent news about the World of Darkness and what it might mean for Werewolf 5th edition. And after that, we will be playing Chapter 4. The chat is already active. Yes, there's mention of why am I in the dark, essentially. And there's a good reason for that. As you might remember, last time I did that, it's because it was story time. And once again, tonight, it is story time, because we'll be talking about the story of the Wild, the Weaver, and the Worm. That's why there's no light. It'll be back a bit later on. Let me start with getting back with that little screen here, because I will be showing you images, and it felt like this was a better background and not necessarily show my face while I'm talking. It was just weird next to the images. Terraria says, I do not approve of this anti-glasswalker propaganda. Yeah, well, how about we tell the story first, and we'll see afterwards if you still think the Weaver is cool. So, here's the thing. Oh, the story from the game is a bit loud again. Let me, I thought I fixed that earlier on. Here we go. Let me know if that fixes it. Stanil, thanks for letting me know. Terraria says, oh no, PowerPoints. Nah, I'm not gonna go that far. I'm just using the magic of OBS to show small images, nothing big, just essentially the glyphs of what I'm talking about as I'm going to be talking about them. So, there's a lot of caveats to be made when you're talking about the origins of the World of Darkness and the origins of the triads. I'm going to explain Werewolf's vision of it. There's a lot of different versions, even outside of Werewolf itself. There's a lot of different versions. If you really want to go deep into it, the actual origin of the World of Darkness is actually the World of Hope, or the World of Light, if you want to call it that way, which is Exalted. But I'm not going to go into that. Yes, Exalted is the secret history of the World of Darkness, at least it was for its two first editions. As of the 5th edition of Exalted, they've officially, canonically decided to no longer be the history of the World of Darkness. That was clarified recently in a podcast, a very cool podcast called The Systematic Understanding of Everything, which is the best name ever for an Exalted podcast. But I'm not going to go into that because Werewolf as a game is not aware of that history, and it really doesn't have any bearings on Werewolf. Yes, you can find the Wild, the Weaver, and the Worm in Exalted. Yes, a lot of the spirits come back. Yes, you can make a lot of parallels with Wraith. You can make a heck of a lot of parallels with Mage. Things like the fact that there is a mechanized planet in our solar system, which is actually the corpse of the dead god. What's his face? I forgot his name. I'm sure chat will find the name as I'm trying to say it, but I will move on in my story. My point is, I'm not going to explain how all of this ties together, and also, since Exalted Third has moved away from that, I'm guessing so will Vampire, Werewolf, Mage 5th edition as well. So there's really no point of talking about that. Terraria says the dead corpse of the Empire of Man. No, it's actually there's a primordial in Exalted who is actually the primordial who showed the sun how to create exalts. The concept of the exalted shard, essentially, the souls of the exalted that can be reborn and such. That was him, whose name I still can't remember, who showed him. And he's still here in the world of darkness. Things have changed a bit. Things have been redefined. And that's the other thing that I'm not going to be talking about. The world of darkness is subjective. It redefines itself occasionally. Mages calls that essentially the consensus, and it changes. What's true today might not have been true a long time ago, and there are also cycles to consider. It's weird to think about that, but for a game called Werewolf the Apocalypse, and the apocalypse being the big thing coming up, it's a bit mind-blowing when you learn, reading in the Macaulay books, that it's actually not the first apocalypse, and it's not going to be the last. So, all of that, I'm not going to go into. It's true, it's there, but it doesn't really matter when you're playing Werewolf the Apocalypse, because what I'm about to tell you is the versions that's correct and true, more or less, for Werewolf the Apocalypse when you play Werewolf the Apocalypse. It is the version that is accurate right now in the world of darkness. Forget the fact that it might have been false several thousand years ago and never actually happened this way. It doesn't matter. Spiritually speaking, the consensus now, the general understanding of it is the version I'm going to explain, and therefore it's the only one that actually affects the world we're living in now. Or rather, the world that werewolves are living in now. Yes, Gene Tests has found the name of the primordial. His name is Autochtone. Thank you very, very much. And the name of the planet that the technocrates are so fond of is Autochtonia. Ooh, gee, I wonder why. Because it's the same damn thing, essentially. It's exactly the same damn thing. And apparently my sound is still loud. Don't know how I can make it softer. I'll lower the volume here, but I'm not sure it affects... Is it my voice or the game that is still loud? Right, Terraria mentions Demon the Fallen. I'm not going to go into Demon either, quite frankly, because I don't know the lore well enough to go into that. And also, frankly, because I don't really like it, in the sense that, you know, I said last week, don't make me unlearn your game. And I still believe that. And I've been believing that for decades, actually. I think it's the ambient setup in the game, right? I actually saw that I can lower the slider even further down, like beyond the visual limit of it. So hopefully this helps. But yeah, Demon is a game that came out, I believe, 2 or 3 years before the end of the World of Darkness. And suddenly everything that we were taught to be true no longer were. Suddenly there's angels, suddenly there's demons, and they were never ever referenced before. So, I mean, I'm sure the lore is cool, but after playing a game for literally 2 decades, I was not really into being told, yeah, actually, nah, it's something else. So I never got into Demon. I'm sure it's cool, but I'm not going to be talking about that. I'm going to be talking about what's true as far as the werewolf books are concerned. Okay, so now that this has been prefaced, let's talk about the triad. Now, the exact order of events is difficult to pinpoint. Chat is moving again. Just so you know, I agree with you. I think each splat should be taken fully and shouldn't try to cross-play lore. Um, well, yes. Well, actually, that's a convenient part. When you think about it, every splat is correct and every splat is true. There's a crossover between there. There's areas where something that is true in more than one. But you don't have to make everything fit together because, once again, the consensus doesn't care. What's true for a werewolf is not necessarily true for a vampire. And yes, they exist in the same world, and the universe doesn't care. It's a notion that is better explained in Mage, I agree, than in any other of the splats, but it is still a universal truth. So, if you like the lore in Demon, then the lore in Demon is correct and it's true, and play with that, and it's fine. It's all canonical. Boo! Stop spreading mage stuff, says Terraria. Well, I mean, I kind of got to, because it's kind of all interconnected. So, let's start. It's unknown which of the 3 triad members came first. And depending on which book you're reading, it changes, to be honest. Of course, you've got the core books, and then you've got the breed books. Every breeds, we're talking were-sharks, we're talking were-cats, hyenas, were-coyotes, were-dinosaurs. There's a whole bunch of were-breeds out there. And they all have their own different versions of what happened. My personal reference that I would suggest looking into more than the other ones is the version that the Anunnaki believe in. And the main reason for that is that for all of the other breeds, it's hearsay. It's legends that they pass from one tribe to another, from one galliard to another, through generations and generations. But the Anunnaki do things a little bit different. That's actually the were spiders, for those who don't know. The Anunnaki do things very, very different. In their training, there is a ritual where the teachers, the 9 teachers who show them the ways, do this weird little rituals where they crumble into a billion little spiders and then reform into this giant avatar of Ananasa. And Ananasa, as you'll see later, when I'll explain it, was there. She saw it happening. Most of it, anyway. And in other words, when you read the breed book Anunnaki, you're not getting hearsay. You're getting a first-person account of someone who was there and telling you how shit went down. She could be lying through her ass for sure. The Queen Ananasa can say whatever the hell she wants. But it is the only source in all of the books, the only narrator that was actually there and knows what she's talking about. So that's the version we'll be talking about today. Still, even then, I can't be sure which of the 3 members of the triad came first, because even Ananasa wasn't there for that little part. So instead of telling you this one came after this one and so on, I'm just going to present to you the 3 members of the triad and tell you who they are and what they represent. Mainly because the game we are playing was a good overview, but there's more you need to understand in order to be a good werewolf. So first we have the wild. which is the primordial force of everything, essentially. The wild represents pure potential. The wild is undefinable, uncontainable, unexplainable. And you can see that in the glyph that represents the wild. It's just random squiggles because you can't visually represent the wild. It's not possible. That's the idea behind the glyph, and that is what the wild represents. I'll get into more details on that, but first I want to present at least an overview of the three players before I go into more details. You have the Weaver. You can see here the Weaver are just a bunch of straight lines crossing each other. The Weaver represents order. The Weaver represents stasis. And then you've got, of course, the Worm, which, as you might have noticed, whenever there was a reference of spirals and dancing, there was a lot of reaction in chat. There you go. You see here, there's a spiral, and that is not random. There is a reason for that, and we will explain that later as I go deeper into the story. The Worm represents not corruption, not any of the bad things that you've been told the Worm represents. That is not true. It became true-ish, but that is not what the Worm stands for. The Worm represents entropy. The Worm represents the natural ending of things. So all three of these entities together are known as the triat, and they essentially represent pretty much every cycle you can think of. Everything has a beginning, the wild, a middle, the Weaver, and an end, the Worm. Usually it is pictured as the cycle of life. That's the easiest way of seeing it. As you're a little baby, or even before that, as you're barely a concept in your parents' brain, you're under the aegis of the wild. You are pure potential. No one knows who you're going to be yet. You're not even formed. You are an idea. You are a concept. That's the wild. After that, once you're born, you become someone. You become defined. You live your life. That is when you fall under the aegis of the Weaver. The Weaver gives you a form, a shape, gives you thought, gives you goals even. The Weaver is what makes you you. You start from being everything possible to being the only possible version of yourself. That is the effect of the Weaver. And eventually, when you grow old and the time is right, the Worm is the one that extinguishes you, that kills you. And usually it's visualized as eats you, devours you. Not in a bad way. All of this, remember, is part of the cycle of life. The Worm removes you to make place for something new so that the cycle can begin again. That's how it should be, and that's how it always should have been. But that is not how it played out after a long while. What happened essentially is that somewhere along the way, the Weaver started losing it a little bit. There was too much work. She needed backup. She couldn't do everything. Terraria says, writing down a thought, Yoden. Don't stop your speech. It took me way too long to realize the wild and Gaia, I guess. It really confused me for a long time. Okay, cool. If you come up with a question, just go ahead, post it, and I'll clarify whatever you need me clarifying. But yes, as you say, I will continue. Right, but you mentioned Gaia. There's something I should clarify here. Or should I do that later? Okay, no, okay. Let's talk about the creation of the world, essentially. Everything that exists has been conceived by the wild, defined by the Weaver, and eventually will be destroyed by the worm. This is important because the way that the weaver does this is via the pattern web, and that's going to come back later, so let's establish what it is. The pattern web is essentially the gauntlet. I know Heart of the Forest doesn't actually let you cross over into the Umbra, but there is two worlds. There's a physical world and there is the world of spirits. Those two worlds are separated by a layer, a membrane, so to speak, called the gauntlet. You have to go through that every time you want to go from one to the other. That is pure stasis, essentially. That is the line between pure potential, spirits. Spirits are made of spiritual stuff, which is entirely the domain of the wild, and the real, the concrete, the defined, not a potential idea, but an actual thing. What separates those two is literally the weaver's stasis. It is what we know as the pattern web. So visualize it this way. The weaver is usually represented as grandmother's spider. See her as taking the undiluted infinite possibilities of the wild and weaving it into a tapestry with her myriad legs. Imagine a spider doing that. She's weaving, hence the name weaver, this into reality. So what separates, once again, reality from the spiritual is that tapestry known as the pattern web. Ergo, the pattern web is everything. It contains everything. It surrounds the universe and it defines it. This is super important for later on. But first, I was going to mention Ananasi because she is essentially the weaver's backup drive. There was too much work for her to do, and there was always some discussion, some kind of issue between the wild and the worm because they could never really agree on things. They're not bad people. They just want completely opposite things. So the weaver oftentimes had to be the middle ground, keeping peace, keeping things balanced, always having to be the teacher or the mother, so to speak, of the other two, telling them, yeah, compromise, buddy, compromise. How about you want this to be that way? How about I make it this way so that eventually it can become under the worm's purview. That's why things like aging happened, essentially. That is something that the three of them had to argue over because the wild wants things to be living and always alive, always prancing around, happy and everything. The wild wants things to never end, essentially. So the weaver had to say, well, I'm gonna make things age so that eventually they grow old and the worm can eat them. Is that a decent compromise? They will live for a time, but eventually they will die. So as you can see, the weaver, at first at least, was really cool and was actually the crux of the relationship between all three of these entities, and pretty much the only reason why things managed to work for a bit anyway. But it was around that time that she created Ananasa, and the reason why, again, I mention her is because she's telling these events from a first-person perspective. And the reason why I explained that the weaver created her is because she was created by essentially a perfect being who, at least back then, who created her with a specific goal and with good intention, which gives credibility to Ananasi's story. She's not some random schmuck. She's essentially the weaver's backup plan. If something goes wrong, you need to be there and take over and help me in the meantime and such. And the other reason why Ananasa is a believable, I believe, narrator is because if you look at the end of the world scenarios. There's a book literally called Apocalypse. There's Gehenna for vampire, Apocalypse for werewolf. There are 4 end of the world scenarios, and one of them is essentially getting rid of the Weaver and replacing her with an Anasa, who actually, according to that storyline, does a good job and actually restores balance. Speaking of, how is balance lost? Again, there's a lot of variation on that, but essentially it boils down to the wild not being a super good listener and being uncontrollable, which is its nature. The wild, for various reasons, in various versions of it, fuck things up for various reasons. In various actions. The one that often comes back is by creating evolution. So things that were supposed to die no longer did. Because, oh, see, there's this new mutation. There's this new little thing cool here that allows them to survive in conditions where they were supposed to die. So the worm got pissed off. And the Weaver as well. Because the Weaver, being a control freak, did not like the wild touching her things, because she saw it as her things now. I made them perfect. I defined them in a way that was perfect. Who the hell are you to fuck that up and modify things that I made? So eventually what happened is that the Weaver got sick of it and snapped. And she tried to attack the wild. Unsuccessfully, but she did so nonetheless. And during the battle, in most versions, the worm essentially tried to help, tried to calm down the Weaver, tried to go, well, you can't trap the wild. You will never succeed at that, so just calm down. Let's find a solution. Let's find another way of handling things. And that pissed off the Weaver as well. Because she was no longer okay with the status quo. She was still angry with the wild, but then she decided that, attacking the worm would be just as good, because why should things die, actually? How about things just stay static forever? That's what I want. Why should I compromise for you 2 kids that can never agree on anything? And why the hell do you keep destroying the things that I made perfect? So the Weaver attacked the worm. Now, again, visualize the Weaver as this huge cosmic spider whose web is essentially the fiber of everything. Her only weapon, her only web, the only thing she could use to attack and ensnare the worm with was her web, which, as you might remember, is creation itself. So the worm was trapped into the pattern web, the very thing that defines everything. Is that sinking in correctly? It is? Okay. Because that's really bad. Why is the worm such a problem? Because he wants to be free. And the only way for the worm to be free is to rip open the pattern web that is trapping it. In other words, the apocalypse, destroying the world, is his goal because that's the only way for him to be freed. He's not evil. He's just trapped and trying to escape. But there's more to it than that. There's a lot more to it than that. But for now, let's just delve a little bit more into that. A long time ago, I said the Black Spiral Dancers had the right idea. However, they're very, very wrong as well. Much of that has to do because essentially their idea is, hey, what about just freeing the worm, right? If we side with the worm and we find a way to free him, everything would be okay, right? That's at least a general drive behind the Black Spiral Dancer, or at least what they make themselves believe. The problem is the next part of the story. While the worm was trapped for uncountable aeons, imagine yourself being trapped in a net. You'd panic, right? Imagine being stuck in a net for aeons. And imagine the net is so tight it constricts you to the point of being painful. That's what the worm has been enduring for an extremely long time. Which had the effect of essentially breaking his psyche. The worm became bad. Yes, at this point in time, the worm is bad-ish because he's no longer himself. He's no longer thinking straight. He is broken. He is despaired. He is panicking. He just wants to destroy everything so that he can stop being in pain and so that he can be freed again. This madness that has taken over him is what became his new aspects, essentially, and is why he became a huge problem for the world of darkness. Not only because he's attempting to destroy it, but because this madness is spreading. This corruption that was born in his desperation is spreading. That's the worm that we think of when we think of the worm. It's essentially the influence of this madness as personified by the triatic worms. What's the triatic worm, you're gonna ask? It is essentially a dark reflection of the triad that I have just explained. The Wild, the Weaver, and the Worm, essentially. In his desire to restore balance. Because once again, the worm is actually trying to do the right thing. He's just not able to do it correctly because he's barking mad. In his attempt in his panicked and mad attempt at restoring the balance, he has effectively developed a personality disorder where he's essentially now 3 different versions of the worm, of the triad within himself. We have here the Beast of War in the middle, which is his representation of the wild. It is chaotic. All of that, of course, will be a certain version of ending things, because that's what he is, right? So the Beast of War, as you can see here, represents warfare and slaughter. It's a chaotic ending, essentially. So gone were the times now when things just died. Now things would die, not over time, not of old age, but things would die because they were killed. Because someone would just suddenly pick up a weapon and say, hey, I'm gonna kill you. That did not happen before the worm became crazy, essentially. Not a good word, my apologies. Before the worm got broken into these 3 individuals, such an idea as murder didn't exist, cosmically speaking. But because of the Beast of War, now it does. The Beast of War, it spreads around and through its followers is spreading murder and mayhem. We also have the Weaver's version of the worm, which is called the Eater of Souls, which represents, here it says gluttony, but it's a bit more complex than that. It is the social, essentially, aspect of I'm sorry, not the social, the mental aspect of the worm. It's a bit more complex to define, to be perfectly honest. But it is a corruption of the mind, a corruption of the soul. It's more spiritual, kind of. However, it's been taken out of play a little bit. A long time ago, you may remember a tribe known as the Croatans, who was a tribe of werewolves that lived in America. And they have now completely disappeared. That's because they actually fought the Eater of Souls directly. they made a ritual that required the entire physical and spiritual sacrifice of their entire tribe to prevent the Eater of Souls from manifesting inside of reality and fucking everything up. So, Eater of Souls is now essentially spiritually bound somewhere in the deep Umbra, unable to do much of anything. And then we've got the Defiler Worm, which is the worm equivalent of the worm, essentially. It is the worm that is about sickness, about well, it says here essentially atrocity, violation. It's a bit of a catch-all version of the worm. I would have put the atrocity and the corruption with the Eater of Souls, but they decided to lump it all together under the Defiler Worm. So the Defiler Worm represents both physical corruption in terms of, as it says here, pollution. So you can think about toxins, balefire, and such. Think of the classic four elements: earth, fire, air, and water. There is a wormish equivalent of all of these elements, and those fall under pollution, essentially, smog, toxin, and so on, which is under the purview here of the Defiler Worm, but also things like deceit, manipulation, and corrupting someone through social means, through essentially convincing them of doing bad things. So corruption itself is under the Defiler Worm. So people who are essentially willingly doing bad things, like, I'm not talking murder here per se, I'm talking about, think of for example, Pentex, who likes to spread pollution, who likes to spread false ideas in the minds of the public, making them believe that certain things that are not true are actually true, and that makes them do terrible things. That falls under the Defiler Worm as well. And it goes even deeper than that. I'm not going to go further than it because we could still be here for a long time. But in a nutshell, there are also 9 other sub-entities which are spread under each of these 3, who represents in succession all of the feelings that the worm has felt through his incarceration. Things like hatred, things like violence, things like greed and apathy, and all of that. He felt them so strongly that they became entities, they became sentient, they became something known as the urge worms. And those are bad things that can take form and that can spread their influence throughout the world, corrupting it essentially a bit more directly than these big 3 here's can do, because most of them can't really cross over into reality because the gauntlet is there stopping them. So they tend to work through their agents, and their agents listen to the what's known as the Maelgen Incarnate, who speak on behalf of the Urgeworms to their various followers. I won't go any further than that on that because it can get pretty damn complicated and even more Lovecraftian than what I've said before, just to use the term of Terraria. But if you want to learn more about the Urgeworms, I strongly recommend buying the book called Chronicle of the Black Labyrinth. It is an amazing book, and me as a storyteller, I've probably used that book more than the Book of the Worm in order to play with the wormish themes. There's a lot of explanation in there about the cultish aspect of worshipping the worm, and more directly the Urgeworms. And there are a lot you can use in there in terms of inspiration for dark rituals. There's an in-depth description of each of the circles of the spiral. Right. I said I would explain the spiral. It's really a spiral that represents the worms spiraling into madness. It's that easy. It's that simple. That's really what it is. And the spiral itself has also a physical manifestation known as the Black Spiral Labyrinth. And it is in the middle of a realm known as Malphaeus, which is where the worm resides. And in the very middle of that labyrinth, you can see the spiritual representation of the worm. So, why are Black Spiral Dancers called Black Spiral Dancers? Well, because essentially they are on a quest to go through all the 9 layers of that spiral to reach the worm itself. To reach the worm itself in the hopes of setting it free. The problem with that is that they can never succeed. By the very nature of their quest is doomed to fail. Again, the spiral represents spiraling into madness, right? So the closer they get to the worm, the more corrupted they become. They go through each of these circles. They are tested at each of these circles by beings, by entities that are vile and evil and born from that corruption and madness of the worm's mind. And to progress further, they have to agree to be corrupted. They have to succeed at these tests that are designed to break their mind and corrupt them. So by the very act of succeeding in this quest, they are failing it. Not a lot of werewolves have managed to get all the way to the worm. Actually, I think only one of them, or maybe 2, did. And historically, whenever they get there, at that point they no longer really want to save the worm, because at that point they're evil. At that point, they just want the power. So, the one werewolf that succeeded historically, that is known to have succeeded historically to have done that, is called Number One. And what he did is that he became Lord of Malphaeus. He just took control. He let the worm be there. He built, and he took control of the city around the Black Spiral Labyrinth. Malphaeus represents both the realm and the city, essentially. So he took over, and he is now the one to whom all of the male gens answer to, essentially. Because yes, he's still alive. He was, legends say that he was the first Metis. So if you want to know one of the main reasons why werewolves don't like Metis, that guy, yeah, he's one of the big reasons. So yeah, that's essentially the story of the worm, because actually it doesn't end. That's where we are. By this, okay, let me get back here. I say that's where we are, but that's not quite true. What do werewolves have to do in all of that, essentially? What does Gaia have to do in all of that? You have to understand that Gaia represents creation itself. So she is life. She is existence. That's what she represents. So while the worm is not per se trapped inside of her, she is a sort of a spiritual representation of it. So if the worm manages to break free, he will destroy creation itself, right? So it's unclear whether Gaia is above or under the triats. There's a lot of different versions of that. But again, going back to Ananasi, she's actually way below the triad. She's just a spirit representing Earth. essentially. The werewolves revere her as being above the triad, but if you believe Ananessa, they are very wrong. She's just the spirit of the earth, just the spirit of the world. So if the world destroys everything that the Weaver has defined, that includes Gaia, because Gaia is the earth is part of what the Weaver has defined. So she's dying, she's hurting, essentially, because she's under attack constantly by the worm. So over time, she created several breeds of shapeshifting creatures, and one of them was the werewolves. She created them while she was enduring a very, very, a very strong pang of pain. And from that anger, from that rage, was born the werewolves, who became her warriors, whose job is to prevent her death. Their job is to prevent the incoming apocalypse. So here we are. So that I apologize for telling a story with no end, but that's really what I have to do, because we don't know how it ends. We might know if you ever run the story of how it ends, because that's your call to make. We are now telling all of the stories of how the werewolves are trying to stop that, essentially. So yeah, I do believe that's all there is to it. Everything that I wanted to cover about that. So as you might see, I've been talking for about 50 minutes. Sorry about that. So there was a lot more to be said than what the game covered, and the nuances to all of that are important, because essentially all of the tribes disagree as to what it all means, right? Earlier we were talking with Terraria about, well, actually the Weavers is pretty cool. Well, yeah, but no. The Black Spiral Dancers for sure believe that it's a good idea to side with the Weaver, to use her tools to fight the worm, and there's a sense in that. If you think about it from a spiritual perspective, if you strengthen the Weaver, you're strengthening the pattern web, and therefore the worm can't really escape. That's true. There's merit to that. There is absolutely merit to that. There's also the opposite view, the Stargazer view, essentially, who see existence and reality as an illusion. So their beliefs is that by meditating and believing strongly, and remember, earlier on I said everything is true if there's a strong enough consensus. So they are not wrong either. If you believe strongly enough that the world is an illusion, you actually end up weakening the pattern web. Not destroying it, just loosening it up. Enough so that in theory, eventually the worm could escape. And eventually, maybe, hopefully, gain his sanity back, and the balance would be restored. There's merit to that idea as well. I won't do all of the 13 tribes, but just with those two extreme opposites, you can see how important that story is to Werewolf the Apocalypse and to tribes and to tribal politics. There's a lot to be said about how the tribes interpret that story and their beliefs that comes with it, and that is one of the most interesting aspects of Werewolf the Apocalypse, and it's one of the reasons why I understand why this game doesn't go into too much depth about it, but that I believe is important that players know about and understand, because otherwise they cannot interact at all with the tribal politics, which is an aspect of Werewolf the Apocalypse that this game does not spend a lot of time with. Tribes and tribal politics. In chapter 4 we're going to learn a bit about a few of the tribes, but there, once again, here is a lot left unsaid. We'll see. Maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll do an episode where I think I talk about all of the tribes in greater details than what this game does. But we are not there yet. We're going to see what the game has to say first. So let me go back to chat, see if there was any questions. And after that, we're going to move on to our second topic, which I'm going to cover faster than I plan to, because I want to get into the game for the second hour of the stream. So here we've got the Wild and Gaia aren't the same. Didn't finish my thoughts. Exactly. And I hope my explanation has helped you understand a bit more about that. Now, this is an actual question. I have heard that the reason the Weaver went mad is because it gained sentience. Argumentably hard to answer, because all three of them are more or less believed to have sentience. Otherwise, how can they have opinions? How can they decide to attack each other and things like that? However, the thing to remember is that everything I've just explained is a representation of what actually happened, because what actually happened cannot be properly explained. Everything that I just explained happened in the Deep Umbra, and the Deep Umbra is a place that defines explanation, essentially. It is pure wild, essentially. If a werewolf was to walk into the Deep Umbra, it would probably die because it would cease to be defined as what it is. There are ways to stop that. There are rituals to go into the Deep Umbra. Yes, that's a thing, but remember, it's extremely dangerous there. So you have to understand that these stories are what entities such as Ananasa say, because it's the best way they have to explain it in a way we can understand. Are the triats sentient? I think they're beyond sentience. They're unexplainable. Their real forms are unexplainable. The Weaver is not really a spider. That's just how we see her, because we can't see her as she is really. We would be driven completely mad if we were to see her real form. It's a thing, actually, for the worm itself. Black spiral dancers actually get to see the worm in its true form in the ritual they go through where they become black spiral dancers. And that's the first thing that just breaks their mind. Just seeing the worm in all his glory is just like, it's enough to break them. It's the first step to making them corrupt. It's just the vision of the worm itself. And the rest is true of the other two. So, are they sentient or not? I don't think anyone can really say. Is that what made the Weaver go crazy? Probably not, I would say. I think I would stick with the explanation of someone who was there like Ananasa and just go with, she did not like what was happening. She was angry, she was jealous, she wanted things to be static. That's what she is, that's what she represents, that's what she wants, and she couldn't have what she wants. She could not essentially be herself. Also, Weaver Philodux. Yes, definitely the concept of a Philodux falls under the purview of the Weaver. Lovecraftian being, the worm doesn't even know or care if humanity exists, it just wants to escape. Exactly. So just like in the game, the forest has a spirit, so Gaia is the spirit of the world? Yes. Yeah. That is exactly that. Don't tell that to a werewolf. You will offend him in such a way that he's probably going to break your face in several little small pieces. But the truth of it, if you believe Ananasa and some other sources, the truth of it is yes. That's just exactly it. And it also fits with the Exalted lore. Gaia exists in Exalted, and she's the spirit of the earth. She's the world we live in. That's it. just as Autochtone is the planet Autochtonia. There, she is she's a primordial in Exalted, and I mean, she just got redefined as the cycles went on into being just the spirit of planet Earth, essentially. As the universe got more and more defined, the boundaries of what you see as the wild and exalted got further and further back and got redefined as something else entirely. We lost the elemental poles, for example. Those are no longer part of the understanding of the universe, so they just no longer exist because consensus shifted, essentially. But yes, that's what Gaia is. So that seems to be all for the chat. So I will now bring my face back. And the lights back. Here we go. Hello again. So last week I mentioned that there was a new game that was announced in the World of Darkness. I will go very quickly over that. It was a battle royale, and I was a bit dubious last week. I didn't know much of anything about it, and I've changed my mind. I'm actually now very, very excited for this game. There was an interview with some of the staff working on the game last Thursday. And they haven't shown the game, but they've shown what they were thinking about when they made the game. What were their goals? What were their ideas? And yes, it's a battle royale, but it really seems to be that they want to give the feel of Vampire the Masquerade still. For example, you need to hunt. So I mean, you're fighting, you're trying to kill these other vampires, but you still need to protect the masquerade, right? So maybe you chase this vampire, and all of a sudden there's a group of humans, and you're like, hiding your weapons, stopping using your supernatural powers, and maybe you sneak into the crowd so the other one loses sight of you, doesn't know really where you are anymore. And if you're, I don't know, maybe a toreador, you take a snack along the way, subtly get a bit more blood into you, and when you're ready, you just slink back out of the crowd and get back into the fight. I don't know if that's an actual mechanic, I really don't know, but what they're saying is that you need to play it like a vampire would need to. You have to be careful about the masquerade, and you need blood to use your powers, so it's a good idea to hunt. So I think we're talking about something that is probably more complex and a longer match than what you would expect from an actual battle royale. And they didn't say also how many players there would be. So I'm thinking maybe we're gonna have something that is closer to what Assassin's Creed tried to do when they did multiplayer, for example. You've got social dynamics, you've got fewer people trying to kill each other. It's not 50 against 50, it's maybe, I don't know, 10 people in a big map, in an entire city, trying to fight each other and kill each other. But in the meantime, they have to deal with mortals. I don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but it sounds like it's potentially pretty cool. There's something new in the chat. Let me see. Then Gaia created the Pharaoh through extreme pain, but the Pharaoh got gifts from each of the triat. So what caused the pain, or did I miss something? Right. Most actually of the Pharaoh were created while the world was still in balance, or not as fucked up. The werewolves are relatively new. For sure, the Mokale, the Rokea, the Gural, and the Ananasi came first. For sure. Like way before the werewolves. Some of them happened along the way. For example, maybe as a solution to a problem, Mokale are usually considered to be the first, and when they were created, their jobs, and actually that's still their job, is to be the memory of Gaia, but probably more the triat. They needed something to remember things so that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. That was before the worm went mad. That was a long time ago. That was the triad thinking we need some kind of reminder of the mistakes we've made so we don't do them again. Um, and a lot of the breeds have similar reasons for existing that really has nothing to do with the worm and the worm stopping or fighting in any way, shape, or form. Um, but that is not to say there was no problems whatsoever, because the original defenders of the world were the Gurals, actually, not the werewolves. Their job was to protect lands, just general lands, essentially, places in where they lived, essentially. They were the ones who were supposed to keep everything safe. Cairns, specifically, protecting cairns, keeping them healthy, was the Nuisha's job back then. So there were always ups and downs, and there were always slight imbalances, problems that were to be course corrected essentially by one or another member sorry, they were supposed to be course corrected by specific breeds created to help running the world essentially in one form or another. However, once shit hit the fan and the worm was actively trying to break free and actively hurting Gaia really, really bad, that is when she created the werewolves specifically. She had enough and she just wanted something to exist to just kill the worm for her. And that it is from that desire essentially that the werewolves were created. Or at least that's one of the many versions in the breed books as to how the werewolves came to be. Um, there's really no mention of them actually, if memory serves, in Ananas's Tale. So I don't really have a version of why the triat made them if it came from them. So I think it makes sense. The version where Gaia actually did create them, I think it makes sense. I hope that helps clarify the timeline thing a little bit more from your question. Going back to news, last thing I want to say before I start chapter 4. Tuesday again, there was an announcement that World of Darkness, essentially, that's now White Wolf no longer exists. Essentially, it's just a World of Darkness team. That's how they're called now. Essentially, recalled the creation of all of the core books, so that they would now be created in-house. So what that means is that, as far as we know, the people who were working on Werewolf 5th edition are no longer working on Werewolf 5th edition. It is now a new team comprised of new people and old people, and people already working on it essentially is what I'm saying, but we don't know who they are. The team itself has not been announced. The wording around it is just new people and familiar faces essentially. Thursday, yes. Did I say Tuesday? Sorry, it was Thursday. So we don't know who's working on it. We just know it's a different team, which may or may not include some people who carried over. And we also don't know what survived in terms of concepts. So while we will be continuing to look into this particular game for hints about what's going into W5, now we need to take much of that with a grain of salt. Considering that the new vision of the new team, essentially now that they're working on these in-house, seems to stay canon with what was made with Vampire 5th edition. They've said that several times. I have no reason to believe that what we know factually, essentially, about W5 will change. I believe that whatever hints we may find in this game will remain hints for what's going to be in W5, and the same goes for Earthblood when it comes out in February. So we're gonna keep looking at this game. I think it's still relevant. However, there might be changes. we just have to take everything we see from now on with a bit of a grain of salt, essentially. So yeah, there was more I wanted to discuss, but I'm not gonna because it's already 8:10. So I wanted to start the game now, go through chapter 4, because we're going to be talking about tribes a lot this week, and I wanted to cover that a bit more, the spiritual side of it, so that we can know what we're talking about essentially when we do. Because we've established now a couple of things that will form a basis for what we're going to be building on when we talk about tribes. So let me just put these back on so I can hear the game. Here we go. And how about in the chat? Can you hear the game? Is it too soft now, or is it perfect? Is it okay for you? I'll click continue still. I'll give time for chat to react. Okay, Toria says it's fine. So let's keep it as fine. Did I lose everyone with this hour-long talk? We still got a lot of people on chat. Perfect. Okay, we've got Stanil, which means we've also got Nomad. Okay, so I think the usuals are here. Okay. Perfect. So last week we went through our first change. Well, not last week because I didn't stream last week. I had a headache. But 2 weeks ago we went through our first change. Let me lower my volume. It's pretty loud in my ear. Okay. We went through our first change and someone died. I don't remember who. I think it was just some it was random hunters. Right. And now we woke up and it is the next day. We've had some explanation from a weasel who spoke electronically, strangely enough, and a wolf entity. Let's see what name. I think the name was different than what I usually get in my place. So let me go back here. Yes, the morning wolf is the other spirit that we spoke to. They've explained the basis of the triat a little bit and why werewolves are supposed to fight the worm. But in a very overviewed way, essentially. Nomad says, "Are you sure I'm there?" Well, I saw your name in the chat, and I mean, I've been in your basement. I mean, there's like a meter between you and Stanil, so I feel safe. I feel safe that you're there. If you weren't, she would have called you back, so. And also, by the way, I'm not saying this because I think what I've been saying for an hour is boring. I'm just saying this because I know these two very well, and I know they already know everything I've just been saying for an hour. So there. Here we are. In the game, we woke up, we spoke to spirits, and now I believe the rest of the group has caught up with us, and they will be teaching us some more things. So here we go. Daria said, "You just typed." What did I type? Oh, right. Nomad's there because he typed. I see. Okay. One of us. A lone howl pierced the silence like a single ray of moonlight in the darkness. Then there was another one, and then another, and then another. A choir of voices, triumphant and joyful. I opened my eyes. Getting a bit of elf back, that's good. When I opened my eyes, I was in a clearing. Around me there were wolves, huge, monstrous wolves, howling at the moon. Werewolves, just like me. Or, I realized that was my life now. So we're being more acceptant of the situation because we don't have rage anymore. Very earlier on, when it described rage, essentially they described it as when you don't have much rage, you're essentially more prone to not have a spine, kind of like less confrontational, more like acceptant of stuff that's just happening. So Terraria is voting for accepting this new life. Let's see what the rest of the chat is going to vote for. I'm just going to give him a few seconds. Here that's interesting too, because I'm starting to see a bit more of the patterns of the game. Because werewolves, just like me, is pretty much as acceptant actually of I realized that was my life now, right? But when I think about it now, I'm thinking that we probably have something very different if we had high rage, right? So even though you have high rage, you need an option that's going to allow you to accept your fate anyway, if you see what I mean. Because you might want to roleplay that you're okay with this. So I think this is why we have two options that are very similar. There is some flavor distinction here. There's a difference between okay, I got to go through with this with and oh, you know what? I'm a freaking werewolf. There's a distinction, yes, for sure. But maybe there's a version where we're not as okay with it, or at least we're more angsty about it anyway. So, oh shit, yeah, butts. Oh god, yes, that is so a bot. What's the thing's name? QRC thingy. Do not see it as a user. It might be gone already. Although I don't think this is... I don't think my list of users in chat in OBS is accurate most of the time when I open it. I have no idea how to kick it out. I hope it's not going to be a problem. Apologies for the bots. So everyone's voted. Everyone that has voted wanted to realize there was a new life, so we're going with that. In a moment of bittersweet reflection, I understood that my old life was over. Maya the student was a part of the past. My present, my future, was now forever linked to what happened in the forest. Well, hello there, Cornell smiled at me, and welcome to the sept. Oh, I thought there was a definition of sept when we highlighted it. Might be later. The what? The sept? Whatever that meant, or I just listened. You have to go actually into Twitch chat. Oh, right. That's how I'm gonna kick it. Okay. You, for those of you who are actually on Twitch, do you see the bot as still present? Do you want me to go there and kick it? Because if I do, my computer, my rig is barely holding on as it is running this game in the stream. So, oh, cool. Thank you. Nomad says he reported the bot, so I think that takes care of it. Thank you very, very much, chat, for that. I appreciate it a lot. So back to the game then. What are we voting for? Do we want a bit more rage? Or do we want some definition of what the sept is, or just let the guy talk? Okay, we have a vote for listened. Okay, good. Let the guy talk. Okay, I will go with that. I realized that my survival depended on learning very quickly, so I just nodded and listened. For a werewolf, the pack is family, Cornell explained, and an alliance of packs united in a common goal is a sept. Stanel voted for the other options, but unfortunately it was too late. I'd already clicked. So that's one of the things. I mentioned before, earlier in an episode, that this line was coming. Here it is. I don't know what to think about this line because I can't say that it's wrong, but it's also not accurate. But then again, maybe it's a change they're doing for W5. Maybe they want werewolves to be less centered around a sept and centered around a cairn, and now it's okay to walk around, and whenever several packs want to work together. Now that's what a sept is. I don't know. It could be. What I'm going to say is that I've heard Garnek talk, which is the writer of this game, and he knows his shit. He knows werewolf. That's clear to me. It seems odd that it would have been written if it's not what he meant to write, essentially. So either that's a change that was requested, or I don't know, actually, because that's not factually true. However, I remember that when I played this game, I had a definition of sept when I highlighted it, so maybe it's coming later. And the definition did include the concept of a cairn. So we have two contradicting definitions in the same game. So I guess the best I can say here is draw your own conclusions, because the game is unfortunately contradicting itself. Not any common goal is a sept. So there were 2 packs here. We already knew that. We figured it out early on in chapter 2, but still. I realized that there must be at least 2 packs there. I looked at Olga, I looked at Cornell, I looked at Danielle, or I looked at Pat. Let's see if it helps you decide who are we friendly with in all of that. We are... Olga is neutral. And Olga, as a quick reminder, is one of the pack leaders. We have Cornell, who is loyal, is the other pack leader. We have Danielle, who is friendly. He's a member of Olga's pack, if memory serves. He's a red talon. And we've got Pat, who I still don't know who that is. A German activist and Cornell's friend. So I assume a member of Cornell's pack. This playthrough, we've seen more of Pat than I ever had in any of my playthroughs, but I still have no idea who she is. I'm sorry. There says no option for Kim. Kim's best. Yeah, Kim's pretty cool. I like Kim. But unfortunately, no option. I wonder why. Are we not cool with Kim? We're neutral to Kim. Right, so I guess they're just putting on the 2 pack leaders and whoever we're more friendly with. So Pat and Daniel essentially makes sense. Because if you haven't figured it out by now, Anya and Bartek are not werewolves, and everyone else is. So we have a vote for Cornell, and we have a vote for Danielle. Oh, right, and then Terraria also says it's 2 for each of the packs. Yeah, that makes sense, because Daniel's with Olga and Pat is with Cornell. So yeah, agreed. It could be that too. Okay, we've got 2 votes for Danielle, so that's what we're going with. And I'm also pretty happy about that, because as you might remember, I want to get closer to Danielle in this playthrough, trying to figure out a bit more of the Red Talon storyline that was hinted at by Garnek. Hi, Maya, said one of the wolves, changing into Danielle. It looked more real as a wolf, confident and relaxed. Olga and Lisa also stood up, human-looking again, their clothes rumpled. We are the pack of the mourning wolf mother, said Olga. They smelled of ash and tears. And for a moment, I saw the wolf spirit among them. Did I read that correctly? Right. Because Wolf Mother is the name that I usually have for that spirit in my playthroughs. But here it says Morning Wolf. That could be because my playthroughs were before release. They might have changed it to Morning Wolf. Or the name of the spirit can change depending on the playthrough. That's cool. I like that. But I don't know if it's accurate. If it is, it's just cool. Speaking of, by the way, me and Terraria were watching a stream recently by another streamer. Unfortunately, I forget the name, but Terraria, please feel free to refer to her in the chat, give her name so that people watching here can go and watch her as well. But there was a stream from another streamer who was playing blind. She didn't know what the game was. Um, she was just playing it, and we noticed. I don't know if you remember a couple of episodes ago. We spent a ton of time translating glyphs. There was an image where we saw a werewolf with tattoos on him, or her, or it. That meant all kinds of things. And in her playthrough, Cassitar, right. Cassitar's playthrough, when she got to that point, the werewolf was not even tattooed. Instead, the glyphs just kind of existed in midair, popping in and out like wisps of ideas or concepts or I don't know what. And most of the glyphs in that version were tribal glyphs, maybe representing all the possible versions of what Maya could be. So I'm very confused about that and super excited, actually, because, I mean, when we're going to be playing this game again, what else are we going to see that is different in such a way? Because when you think about it, there's no reason for that screen to be completely different, right? Unless it means something. For each of the playthrough, if that screen is different, it's got to be meaningful, right? And I don't know in what way yet, but it's a mystery that I hope, with the help of the chat, we can explore a bit further. So now I'm even more excited to finish this playthrough and start a new one to see how many variations of that screen we can see and what we can figure out of what it meant. There was a lot fewer wormish elements in her playthrough in the glyphs that we were seeing, which were not part of her. So I think her version represented more of the possibilities of what Maya might become. Whereas in our version, if you might remember, it was tattoos, and some of them we thought might be wormish related a bit more. So I'm thinking maybe there's a line early on where you can choose to dance during a massacre. Maybe we chose that, and the game thought, this guy is going a bit towards the worm, right? Because we're dancing the spiral, right? I don't know, but I want to figure it out. Hi, Maya, said one of the wolves. Right. They smelled of ash and tears, and for a moment I saw the wolf spirit among them. I looked at Cornell or Pat. Let's see what the chat thinks about that. And by the way, chat, when I'm talking, don't hesitate to vote while I'm talking. It'll save us some time when I'm done to choose essentially the options, just so that we can move ahead, because it's already 8:30. I spoke way too long about the triat. It was worth it though, because there was a lot of lore to be said that is not often said. Even then I skipped a bit. I didn't even explain how problematic the Weaver and the Wild can be, because they can be just as problematic in a game as the Worm is. But I guess we'll get to that in a different episode. But still, I'd like to catch up and maybe be able to finish chapter 4 tonight without it being a 4-hour episode. So please don't hesitate while I'm talking to cast your votes, please. There was a red talon tribe symbol, which I'm pretty sure Maya cannot be. Correct. I mean, maybe, but if she can turn red talon, we're probably going to see it in this stream because we're pretty close to Danielle, but it would be very, very surprising because Griffin, the totem of the red talons, does not allow hobbits. So unless that's something that's changing in W5, which could be the case, it's not going to happen. But if it is the case, oh my god, we're learning something about W5. So there are 2 votes for I looked at Cornell. Let's do that. A great gray-eyed wolf changed into Cornell, and soon Pat and Kim joined him. We are the Winter Weasel Pack, said Kim. A white shadow settled on Pat's shoulder. I smelled musk and electricity. We're all Gaia's soldiers, said Cornell. In that we have no choice, but we can choose whom we fight alongside. We've got a cunning answer because we're Ragabash that says war. That didn't sound safe. Interesting. Did I have to join a pack or I had so many questions? Do we have a auspice? No, we don't have an auspice yet. Okay, that's going to come this episode. But come on, we're Ragabash. We're definitely Ragabash. So, oh, Gaia's Soldier. Let's see what this game has to say. The Earth, in both a physical and spiritual sense. The Mother Goddess. Falls in line with what I said earlier. No choice. I mean, there is a choice to die. You mean if we refuse to fight the war? Yeah. Okay, so 1 vote for war, 2 vote for war. Good enough for me. I mean, there's 3 of us active in the chat, so as soon as I have 2 for a vote, that's obviously what I'm going to pick. Is this war a necessity, I asked. It doesn't exactly sound safe. Interesting, because maybe we'll get more of the explanation that I actually gave earlier in this episode that I thought was not in the game, but maybe it is. It's not. But if the worm wins, we'll all die anyway, Olga shrugged. The name of the enemy reeked of decay and burning oil. War is not safe unless you know the trick, Pat smiled. The trick is to make the enemies die first. Okay, that doesn't explain much about the worm. Okay. That's fine. So we have, did I have to join a pack or I had so many questions? I suppose we're going to have to pick all of them anyway sooner or later, but still just in case, I will let chat decide. I mean, to be fair, the game tells you enough to complete itself. You know enough about werewolves to make the choices that you need to make in this particular game. It's fine. Maybe I'm too much of a lore buff, I guess. I don't know how to describe myself in this way. Maybe it's because I love the lore so much that I wish it was there. That I keep mentioning this bit isn't there, this bit isn't there. It's not a flaw of the game. I want to make that very, very clear. This game is awesome and I love it, and it's fine. Again, a lot of people who don't know Werewolf played this game, and no one that I know anyway came out and said, I felt like I didn't know enough, right? I think the game tells you what you need to know. Yes. Still, to make the game even better, I think it would have been cool to have maybe 1 or 2 extra chapters, flesh out a bit more some of the characters, and flesh out that bit of the lore. Like, a lot of it is just exposed on chapter 4. It would have been nice to have a bit more of that in chapter 5, you know, before we choose our tribes and such. But we'll see. Nomad says, no, sorry. Wait, Terraria says, I do like in High Tongue, they say smells and tastes. Not sure I'm following you there. But in terms of vote, we have Stanel says, so many questions. Nomad says, join a pack. Terraria question as well. And we've got a bit more here that says, the non-white person loved the game and is currently doing a second playthrough off stream. Nice. Nice. I'm glad she liked it. Glad she liked it. I mean, everyone I know who played the game has loved it. I don't think I've seen a single negative I mean, there are some negative comments, but everyone has had a good experience and played at least twice as far as I know, so that's pretty cool. So I think we had more about questions here. Terraria says, High Tongue is this game's name for the Garou tongue. Yes. I'm aware of that. What do you mean by they say smells and tastes? I smelled musk and electricity. Just trying to figure out what's the thing here. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'll keep playing that though. I had so many questions is what the chat voted for. I have, oh wow, okay. That was helpful. I have so many questions. I shook my head, and here are the questions. What about the moon? Was every set that diverse, or how did the spirits work? I'm not even sure I've ever seen those options before. I think some of them I've seen. Like, I know for sure I've seen this one. Maybe because we're cunning, we have more, and in high rage, you don't. Or maybe it's something they added. I don't know. I don't know. It says the word of the worm smells of... Oh, I see. The tongue conveys a smell. Right, I see what you mean. Okay, yeah. Yeah. For sure, that's pretty cool. So we have a vote for diverse and a vote for moon. So no matter, we need your vote, bro. We need a splitting vote. If Nomad's vote does not break the tie, once again, my rule is that I just pick the one that came first. So depending on Nomad's vote, sorry. But he did break it anyway with diverse. But if he had said like spirits, for example, I would have gone with diverse because it was chosen first. You are from all over Europe, I noticed. Is this like a standard for a set? I looked at Cornell. I looked at Olga. They're throwing a lot of small choices here in our direction. I don't remember it being that way before. I could be wrong. It's been a while for me now. We have a vote for Cornell. Do we have another vote? Okay. In the spirit of finishing, I'm going to pick Cornell. Yeah, we just got another vote for Cornell anyway. I didn't even know if that was a stupid question or a smart one. I looked at Cornell. Is far from the standard, but desperate time... I think there's a word missing here. It is, maybe? Far from the standard, but desperate times make strange bedfellows. He smiled sadly. Normally a sept is dominated by one tribe, maybe two. There are at least a dozen tribes, Daniel interrupted, and I hope, Manya, that you will choose yours wisely. I do not remember the game saying that. Maybe it wasn't there when I played it, but I'm so happy that it is here now. This is getting already a bit more context than what I had in my first two playthroughs. Because that's completely true. Especially in Europe, there is usually actually just one tribe per sept. So I'm pretty cool they're going with there. In America, there you see more multi-tribal septs. For the obvious reason being that there were originally three tribes that separated the continent, and when invaders came in, well, they took what they wanted, and things got a bit more mixed up than what you have in Europe, where it's mostly spread out by tribe. It's problematic. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying how it happened. So we're going back to the original two questions where we have what about a moon, or how did the spirits work? So obviously we're going to have to choose them all anyway, so I'm just going to go and pick one. Why did I hear the moon whispering to me, I asked. Luna gave us rage. That is why she's important, Olga said. And that is why you'll never be able to touch silver again. Lord up. They said earlier that the werewolves were created by Gaia in a pang of pain to destroy the worm. That's completely true. But every Pharaoh needs a patron spirit. So whether the triat or Gaia created them doesn't really matter. One of them did. But none of them could do it without having a powerful spirit as their patron. As far as I know, there are three patrons existing. You have Ananasi, which does not give rage. As you may know, the Ananasi do not have a rage stat. They've got a blood pool instead, like vampires. And then you've got Helios, the sun, who used to be known as the the unconquered sun, because once again it's the same setting, and you have the moon, Luna. So draw the conclusions you want based on Exalted from that, but yeah. Still, point being, you have two patrons who can shepherd a breed. You've either Elios or Luna. They both give access to rage. For werewolves, the moon, Luna, is their patron, and that is why they have access to rage. That is why they cannot touch silver. If your patron is Helios or the sun, your weakness is gold. So you have a breed, for example, like Mokole, who actually are patroned by both of them. So they're allergic to both silver and gold. That's pretty cool. And the Nanasi have no weakness. I was going somewhere with this though. Why did I bring that bit up? Right. Because I like here, I said before, Garnek knows his shit, right? Here he says, Luna gave us rage. That is correct. There is a version of this going around where people think that the rage came from the worm. Unfortunately, these people are also correct. I cannot deny that they are correct because some books say that to be true. Specifically, the End of the World books came around and said, "Whoa, actually, plot twist. The worm gave you your rage, and that is why you have hatred in your heart. That is why you are a flawed breed. That is why you did the War of Rage, and that is why the tribes can never work together, because such is the curse that the worm put in your heart." I don't like this version at all. It makes sense because it explains why werewolves are so shitty, but none of the other breeds have that problem, and they almost all have rage anyway. So it explains werewolf specifically, but as soon as you pull the camera back a little bit, it no longer makes any sense whatsoever. Because once again, most of those breeds that have rage existed before the worm was corrupted. It doesn't work as a theory if you pull the camera back. You don't have to pull the camera back though. You can play with that version and it's fine. Once again, consensus and all of that. And golden rule, play with the version of the game that you like. I'm just saying I'm not playing with that version personally. I prefer the version that Luna gave us rage, because mostly, for the same reason I don't go with the demon lore, it's the explanation we had for 20 years until all of a sudden a book came out and said, actually, that's not true. So here I really, really like that Garnek went with the moon gave them rage. Maybe W5 will keep going in that direction. I don't know, but I really hope they do. Let's go to chat for a second. Terraria says, that is one thing packs in Plague Game are multi-tribes, but lore talks about packs being mostly one tribe. Is there a reason for this in lore, or is this just PC parties are special? Right. Well, the thing to remember is that a lot of the games, a lot of the World of Darkness settings tend to be very America-centric. In America, you can get away with it pretty easily. The other thing to remember is that just because a tribe is on the territory, just because a sept is in a territory of a particular tribe doesn't mean they can't have guests, for example, who can come from elsewhere and just get involved. For example, again, it's more likely in America, but let's take the cairn in New York, in Central Park. Technically, that is a Bonauer cairn. They're the ones who rule there. They're the ones who decide what happens there, right? So you'd say maybe 60% of the werewolves there are Bonauer, and no one is contesting that it is a Bonauer sept. But you've got all kinds of other people there as well. There are werewolves on that sept from other tribes, and they are welcome as long as they play by the rules set up by the Bonauer. Even King Albrecht himself, he's a Silver fan. He hung with the Bonauers of that sept for years before he became the king. It was fine. It was allowed there. He could live there. So you can explain it that way. Another explanation you can use, which is, I think, the official explanation if you're starting a new game. They're using the excuse that there are so few werewolves in the world that they tend to lend each other new cubs, right? So let's say a sept has one cub, you can't make a pack with one cub, right? So they might be in contact with another sept far away, another territory where they have another cub, right? And they're all going to talk this way, and eventually someone's going to go, hey, well, if we combine this tribe, this tribe, this tribe, and this tribe, we have 4 cubs. We can make a pack out of this. So how about one of these septs from one or the other of the tribes organize a rite of passage, and these 4 people from completely different backgrounds, from completely different tribes, will come together, have their rite of passage, and become a pack together, right? This, of course, goes with the assumption that you are born into a tribe, which is incorrect. You are accepted by a totem. But a lot of the lore gets that wrong in the book and keeps talking about being born into a tribe and this tribe does this, where it's no, your totem accepts you, but still. So I think that's one of the reasons where you can have packs of multiple tribes without necessarily having to fuck around with the lore. The bits where you need to fuck around with the lore a bit more is when you are storytelling a LARP. Because then you need to have 30 people of different tribes in the same spot and make it work. So there are many ways to do that. I've had several excuses in the past to justify that. Literally in my first LARP that I ever did, I had read 2 werewolf books by then. I had read Ananasi and the core book. That's it. And I still started the game. Some people in chat were in that game, actually. What I did back then, I didn't know better, so I didn't know that you couldn't really have multi-tribes, so it kind of worked out. But essentially all of the elders had been wiped out, and all of the cubs were left. I didn't know at the time that you weren't supposed to have 20 cubs at a set. I didn't know that. So all of my players were essentially cubs who just had to go, well, shit, let's take over this set then, because we need someone to run things. So all of the cubs organized together, went through their rites of passage, and ended up into various tribes, chosen into various tribes. So it kind of worked. Nowadays, I wouldn't do that anymore because I know it doesn't make any sense to have that many cubs in the same sept. But it worked for us back then. So you can... Well, that one's a bad explanation, but it is an explanation. You can find a way to justify having that easily. If you're playing tabletop and you just need to justify a pack, it's easy. Just use the rite of passage explanation that several cubs from several sets join together in your set. And Senel says, I love Mokoli. Shame I never actually played one. That's very true. She's referring to a game where I did a what if scenario, another LARP I did, my second LARP actually, where the Garou lost a War of Rage, and my players could play as just about any breed they wanted. And she was a Naga, a were serpent who was posing as a Mokoli undercover. So she was never actually a Mokoli. So back to the game. And this is why you'll never be able to touch silver again. How did the spirits work? What about the spirits? I asked. How does that work? The world casts a shadow, and we call it the Umbra, said Lisa. And in the shadow, every living creature, every emotion and idea, every important object exists as a spirit. That's all you need to know at the moment. It's good enough, actually. I know I keep saying they have to give more lore, more lore, but quite frankly, yes, the Umbra is way more complex than that, but you don't need to know that. This is good enough. honestly. Especially for a game that doesn't remotely go into the Umbra. That's good enough. Did I have to join a pack? I asked, just to make sure. No Yaru can survive on their own, Olga stated the obvious. You may not like it, but if you want to live, you need us and our support. And we need you. So want to look at this. Garu, the term werewolves use for themselves. Not quite true. Garu refers to Garu Nation. So you are a Garu when you join the Garu Nation. There are other organizations of werewolves that are not part of the Garu Nation, and they don't use the term Garu. In Asia, you have the Beast Courts, which is an organization of several Fera working together, including werewolves. They have a tribe there called the Haken, which are actually essentially Shadow Lords. You just go by a different name. They have slightly different point of views, essentially, but they're Shadow Lords. They also have Silent Striders over there, but not a lot of tribes exist in Asia. Still, those are not Garu. They're werewolves, but they are not Garu. You also have the Ahadi now, which is a similar organization that exists in Africa. They're new to W20. And I'm very sad we didn't get more books for W20 because I really, really would have loved a book on the Ahadi. Terraria says, looks at the protagonists of Earthblood for the no werewolf cannot survive on their own. Yeah, but he lost his pack, though. He lost his pack, from what I understood. I think he's on the path of revenge or something like that. We'll see when the game comes out. But you're correct. They did make a Garu game with a werewolf not in a pack. We'll see how it works out, but yeah, right. I summed it up. So if I got this all right, I've been conscripted into an ancient war against the worm, I said slowly, trying to put it all together. And the moon gave me rage as a weapon, but I must avoid silver. Here they say the worm, manifestation and symbol of evil, entropy, and decay in Garu belief. For everything I just said in the beginning, I'm not going to repeat this again, but you know what I think. I took a breath. There's a whole secret world of spirits, I continued. And I have to join a pack and choose a tribe. Exactly, Lisa nodded. As for the tribe, there are 2 people who could mentor you now. Olga is from the Black Furies, an ancient tribe of women warriors, and Cornell is from the Children of Gaia, and he's more a peace and harmony guy. Senel says the Jedi was in negotiation in the original setting, I seem to recall. Yeah, they were mentioned. They were mentioned in Revised. Interesting. I may not have caught that one. Oh, all right, cool. Still, in either case, they were. There's a whole section essentially about the Ahadi in the Changing Breed book for W20, and it's not enough. It's cool, but it's not enough, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I would have liked an entire book on them. So thank you for correcting me. I was clearly wrong. It's not new for W20. But the more important point essentially is that they deserve to be detailed more. It would have been nice to have them. One of the coolest reason is that the Ahadi are more or less led by a breed who was not done justice in previous books. The breed is the Ajaba, and they're the were hyenas. They're super cool, but they got jammed at the end of the Bastet book. Bastet is already a pretty beefy book. Bastet are the werecats. They spend a lot of time on the cats, and then at the end you've got a 20-page maybe or something like that about the Ajaba. So they never really got their own real breed book going into great details about them, and they're cool and they deserved it, but they didn't get it. So when the lore went forward, other books came out, And there was a problematic, let's just say, Bastet in Africa called Blacktooth, is if memory serves. He got dethroned, and the politics in Africa advanced to the point where the breeds and the local werewolves, mostly I believe Red Talons, Striders, and Black Furies, if memory served, started working together and build this political entity that we know as the Ahadi. And the character who made it happen, the character who orchestrated the creation of this, wasn't a Jabba. It would have been, if they are not going to be making new breed books, it would have been an occasion, I think, for them to revisit the Ajaba and give them a stronger flavor, essentially their own essence that they never really got. I feel personally. Okay, I think so. In response to what I said, I'll check on it and come back to you next week. Okay. Nomad says family tribe is voting here for the family tribe. Stanel says vote for children. Terraria says Miss Newspaper Reporter. Miss Newspaper Reporter. Are we talking about Erica here? The press character? She's Oh, you're saying that because we think she's a Bastet, right? Right. I still don't know. I really hope one day someone from the team, because I know some people of the team are watching my stream. I hope one day some of them come up to me and say, "Oh my God, you guessed it right!" That would make my year. And then we've got also Stanley that says, "The more you talk, the more I'm sure it was a negotiation." I think so, actually. The more I talk as well, the more I remember it as well. I do think that you are correct, and it was there, but I think it was more of a passing reference. Might have been in the revised Player's Guide to the Changing Breed. I'm not entirely sure. But it's ringing some bell of something that was hinted at, but actually only given through space in a book in W20. Or I missed it. If it was properly defined in revised, it's just not a book I read. So we have, going back, 2 votes for the family's tribe and 1 vote for children. Okay. I'm happy about that, actually, because there's, oh my God, so much we're gonna have to talk about once I click on what about my family's tribe. There's a lot to be said here about that. So we'll see where that takes us. I'll wait for an appropriate time to unload all of that. But this is going somewhere. I would have had to talk about it anyway if we picked another option, because it's just the biggest complaint that people have about this game, so I have to cover it. I do apologize for any team member who's going to be watching my stream. Yes, I'll cover it. But once again, I love your game and I trust you completely, so I will cover it in as positive a light as I can, because I'm sure you had a good reason to do what you did. But I will mention it. I have to. I wouldn't be doing my job right if I didn't. So what about my family's tribe? The Shadow of Fenris. Hey, what about my family's tribe? I asked. Lisa winced. Daniel sighed. Olga shook her head. What was the matter? What's the matter? I asked again. Your ancestors were the Get of Fenris. And no one here wants to have anything to do with that tribe, Cornell answered. They stand against everything we believe in. Were they really that bad, or did I come from a tainted bloodline? Let's see what the chat thinks. Oh, wait, it's doing it. Here, all of the tribe symbols just flashing in the back. Except this. That's the one that I could not recognize. Where is it? There. Stanel, did you see that one? What is that? back here. We can't see it too well. Black Spiral, that's Uktena. Talon, Black Fury. This there. Is it a Silverfang house? Could it be a Silverfang house? There again. Okay. This time I'm going to look in the book for it. Sorry for this intermission, people. I apologize. I'm gonna try to do this quickly. Not waste too much of your time. Yes! Ha ha! It's a Silverfang house. It is House Unbreakable Heart. Ha! Boom! Oh shit, okay. Let me see. Let me see. I have to see the houses again. What does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? They did not include the symbol for Silverfang. They just included one specific house. Well, I think we're close to Unbreakable Heart territory here. Okay, so I'm not going to get into the houses because that's another level of way too complicated for no reason. But most tribes have camps, right? And because the Silverfangs have to one-up everybody else, they don't have camps. They have houses, they have lodges, they have all kinds of different things. And it's, I mean, it's cool, but I don't think any game needs to really go into that kind of nuances. But what is interesting is that most of these houses have their own territory. Just like tribes of it have different territories. Within the Silverfang tribe, certain regions of the world belong to a specific house, essentially. So it's sort of like tribes within the tribe. And there is a lot of history there that is actually pretty cool. And I think if memory serves, House Wormfoe is the house of the king, King Albrecht. So these are in America. Crescent Moon, I believe, is the house of Queen Tamara Tavarovich. And isn't Unbreakable Heart the one that almost fell to the worm but didn't because they just destroyed it before they could fall to the worm? I think. If I'm not mistaken, that's the one. Interesting. Very interesting. I unfortunately can't be more specific than that because I have not read Silverfang in a while. And anyway, that story wouldn't even be in the Silverfang book. It's in Rage Across Russia, I believe. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. I find it odd that these are all tribe symbols, but the Silverfangs don't even get their own. Just a house. That's got to mean something. And we'll get back to that when we talk about the Fenrir later. I didn't actually, Terraria's gonna ground me for that, but I didn't have time to watch the end of the stream of the lady we were talking about earlier. She became a member of the Get a Fenris, but the game didn't use the term Get a Fenris there. It was referred to as some kind of group I'd never heard of before. That is described as an offshoot of the Fenrir, and I'm very curious about that as well. I think that both the glyph from the house instead of the tribe, and the reference to an offshoot of the Fenrir are two of the three biggest hints this game contains about changes to Werewolf 5th edition. Either it's just a local thing that they use this because the local fangs happen to be of that House Unbreakable Heart. Maybe it's just that. But also, maybe W5 has something important to do with them. The thing with the Fenrir being us ending up into an offshoot of the Fenrir may be a hint that they're pushing the Fenrir away and replacing them with a new tribe. I don't know. An offshoot. I don't know. We'll get into that as I read it in the game because, again, I did not watch the end of the stream, so I don't have all the information there. And the third hint we'll get to in a minute, actually. So I will not spoil that right away. So we have votes. We have. Wait. Terraria says, I just had some internet problems, but I will say you won't get a reference to what we found out on this playthrough. Okay, about the... You mean the get? Okay. I'll... Alright, well, we'll see what happens. We have a vote for Tainted Bloodline. Stanel says, I believe Black Spiral. Terraria says, Tainted Bloodline. So we have 2 for Tainted Bloodline. 1 for Really That Bad. And it was a breaking of the Fenrir, those who were tied to the neo-Nazi. The Nazi normally should be the Sword of Heimdall, if memory serves. That was a camp of Fenrir. The name you gave me was different than that. But though you just said neo-Nazi, so they're back? Are the... Huh. It could be easily that... Okay, I think I see what you're going for. Maybe what's happening is that they want to get rid of the bad element of the Geta Fenris. We'll get into that in a minute, but the Geta Fenris are a bit of a problematic tribe. Some of them were on Hitler's side, let's just say, to keep it simple. But that was a camp known as the Sword of Heimdall, which were exterminated by the Geta Fenris. But there's still a lot of problematic elements with the history of the Geta Fenris. And maybe in W5 what they want to do is say that this new offshoot are what's left of these. They're over there and we don't like them. But the actual Geta Fenris themselves, the playable tribe, are actually good guys. Maybe that's what they're going with. For now, that's my guess. I'll know more when I actually read it in the game. I have not yet had any playthroughs where I've gotten anywhere close to being a Fenrir, so I don't know. This is a guess for now. So the choices were for the Tainted Bloodline, so we're going to go there. I'll get back to the get thing, don't worry. I just want the game to get it off its chest so that we can get talking. Does that mean that my blood is tainted? I asked. Tribe is not always a birthright. Sometimes it's a choice, Cornell said. So choose wisely. True, but also untrue. Yes, you can choose your tribe, but what you're doing is you're actually pleading a spirit to accept you in its tribe. So you can aim for a tribe, but there's never a guarantee that you'll get your choice. This game went with you can just choose, which is fine. It's okay. Again, you can play however you like, and maybe that's a change for W5 as well. All of that is possible. But by the book, your spirit chooses you. Geta Fenris are the most radical Garou supremacists that ever marred the face of Earth, Kim scoffed. Like legit fascist werewolves. Some of them literally worked for Hitler. Okay, I guess this is where we're doing this. I'm also going to read here. Should I start with that? Okay, no, I'm going to start here. Okay. So one of the biggest complaints that people have of this game is that the Geta Fenris are not that bad, and these characters are reacting very strongly to the Geta Fenris. Now, the devs have explained why, and I completely agree with them. The Geta Fenris are not bad people as a tribe, but they have done really bad things, historically speaking. Much of that was addressed, I think we spoke about this before, but the earlier you are in Werewolf, the badder they are. And the more the game approached, more they were retconned and tried to be turned into something that was a bit more playable, a bit more approachable, and a bit friendlier. So by the end, they were actually bon vivant. They were people who just like to have a good time, like to party and celebrate life. They fought hard and partied hard. That was their more recent explanation of it. But still, they acknowledged that the other versions used to exist. It's just that eventually clicked that if they continued this way, it was not sustainable. They would destroy themselves. So they were moving away from that into becoming a better tribe. They evolved into something better, essentially. It's factually written in the books, but it still acknowledges that before that they were jerks and they did a lot of bad things. And this is why the characters here are reacting strongly. You can't suddenly erase your entire history just because you had a change of heart. The Get of Fenris gets some pretty bad rep from the other tribes in character, in universe, and that is entirely accurate. A lot of that comes from how they used to treat women. Uh, that's crap. Actually, that is not. That is. They did not do well in that front. Unfortunately, they were. Um, um, Essentially, there was a rivalry between the big macho guy of the Get on Fenris and the women of the Black Fury. They were often described as enemies just based on that gender thing in earlier editions. That was horrible. That was bad, and it was actually part of the things that they did retcon in the revised. In revised, it was stated that they didn't care actually about gender, men or women, or Metis or not Fenris or Garuborn as I've decided to call them now to avoid the problematic term. Sorry, doesn't matter as long as you're doing your job, as long as you're pulling your weight, you're a Fenrir, and we love you and you're welcome in the gang. Um, but that was only in revised. Before that, they were jerks. They were just jerks. Um, so here again, this is warranted. The reaction is warranted. I mentioned about the misogynist bit, but even worse than that, the Fenrir were conquerors. A sept is a sacred place. It's essentially the equivalent of a church for werewolves. It's or way more important than that even actually. A church doesn't even come close to how important a cairn is, but it's really super important, right? And the Get of Fenris have a fixation with strength, right? You have to be strong. Um, and weakness is something to be weeded out. So what the Fenrir did for generations and generations and centuries is that they regularly attacked other cairns of other tribes, killing people if they needed to. Because in their minds, they were doing a good thing. They weren't, but that's what they believed in. That's what the teachings of Fenris taught them to do. If the cairn was able to repel them, they would go back to their own sept and they would be happy because this tribe has proven to be strong, right? They were able to resist the strongest tribe of them all, the Get of Fenris, the best warriors, right? So if they could do that, then they were allowed to keep their cairn. They were strong. They were going to be able to protect it from the worm. If they were not strong enough, they would kill everyone and take their place. So that now the cairn would be protected by people who were actually strong. That's what the Get believed in for a very, very, very long time. And so you have to come from that understanding here that these other people are all coming from tribes that have been invaded and murdered by Fenrir warriors for generations. That's why they hate them, and it is warranted. Now, the problem comes from this. This explanation is in universe, right? It is how others perceive the get of Fenris. So up until there, I'm completely behind the developers. But if you look at the description here, Get of Fenris, a tribe of werewolf supremacists who celebrate the destruction of the human world and Father Fenrir the end of the human world that Father Fenrir promises at Ragnarok. Antagonistic to the other tribes to the extent that some whisper of worm taint. Hated and distrusted, many see them as another enemy in the War of Apocalypse. A lot of that is completely true, but not the part about a tribe of werewolf supremacists who celebrate the destruction of the human world that Father Fenris promises at Ragnarok. That is not part of the Fenrir lore. And what I'm thinking here is that the game is still trying to tell you something in character. The issue is that it's not clear. If you're seeing it from the biased perspective of the other tribes, this makes sense, right? They probably believe that Fenrir actually want the destruction of the world. Why else would they be attacking us like the worm is attacking us all the time? This explanation makes sense if you're seeing it from an in-game perspective. But the opinion of the internet is that this text is perceived to be objective, not an in-game perspective, and therefore should be accurate of what the Fenrir actually believe in. I apologize, but I do have to concede that point. The Fenrir are just as devoted as any other tribe to fighting against the worm and saving the world. They have a very skewed version of how to do that, but they are still devoted to that. So maybe, I mean, again, it makes sense if you see it from an in-game perspective, and maybe that's where it chafes. Maybe that's where it rubs people the wrong way. Might have been a good idea, or might be something that they could still do with a patch if they agree. I'm not saying they have to do anything. The devs will do what they want, and I have no place and no right to tell them what to do. That's not what I'm doing. Just giving an opinion here that maybe the text could be slightly modified to make it clear that even this bit there is from the in-game perspective, what other people believe that they are, and not a factual reality. Because once again, I've spoken to the developers on Discord, on the World of Darkness Discord, and they have explained their position about all kinds of topics on Werewolf that people have picked apart and questioned, and they've answered there, and I've seen their answer, and all of it makes sense. A lot of that came directly from Garnek, and he knows what he's talking about. He really understands and knows Werewolf. I mean, come on. This entire game, one of the thing that people keep saying is that, wow, it really nailed the feeling of Werewolf, right? So yes, obviously they know what they're talking about. They wouldn't just get something this wrong, right? They have to know the Fenrirs don't actually think this way. So the only explanation that makes sense is that this too is also from an in-game perspective. So in the end, I will back the developers on this. I wish the description was a bit more clear in terms of it being an in-game perspective. Like, we've played several weeks ago Shadows of New York. These entries, the equivalent of these entries in Shadows of New York, are all written actually from the hand of the protagonist. So yes, they are skewed. They're not entirely accurate, and that's on purpose. But this game does not have the benefit of having established that, and I think it would have gone a long way. So the chat is saying it was breaking of the Fenrir, those who were tired of the neo-Nazi. No, the opposite. The new tribe are the good ones. Okay, so they're exactly the reverse of what I said. That's fine. Based on what I know, I think it is a hint at W5. Get a Fenris will become what is being described in the game, and the new offshoot will be the new playable tribe. Yes, right. So that was going to be my next point. But honestly, Terraria has, I believe, summed it up pretty well. Not discounting everything I just said, but the other possibility is that, yes, this is actually objective and not in game. If that's the case, it's not flack that should be directed at the game. In that case, it would be a change coming up for W5, and that's fine too, in the sense that Revise tried to change the tribe itself, right? To retcon things, and it wasn't super elegant. So if W5 wants to retcon the Get of Fenris better, it might make sense to just let go of the term Get of Fenris and just say, you know what? Fine, they were evil all along. Fine, everything we know that is problematic about the Get of Fenris is actually true. And hey, why not throw in that they actually want to celebrate the destruction of the human world that Father Fenris promised as at Ragnarok, and just put them there, make them villains, make them bad guys, and just create an offshoot that will embody everything that is good and fun and nice about the Get of Fenris, and you can still play that. And it's going to be the okay version of the Get of Fenris. So that way all the baggage follows the Get, because anyway, to be perfectly blunt, a lot of people online, when they talk about the Get, they don't see the retcon version. They don't see the new version. They only see the bad version of the Get of Fenris as the Get of Fenris. So frankly, if that's the move that W5 is going for, I approve. The general perception of players is that the Get are like that. So fine, they're like that. We don't like them anymore. They're let's say they're not even in the nation. Who knows? They're just over there, far away, and here's this offshoot you can play who are actually good guys. I don't know if that's what they're going for. We'll see when the book comes out. But I think it tracks. So there's these two possibilities. In both cases, I think that the developers of this game have received a lot of flack for something that is either not their fault or something that is just a bit unclear and could have been clarified. However, I'm going to go with the theory of the W5 change because of what comes next, what Terraria has mentioned. It all lines up very, very well. And, I mean, obviously, they wouldn't be able to say it, right? Online, if that was the explanation. So, if it was just a matter of clarifying, they probably would have said so. Again, I have no insider information about that. I have some insider information because I reviewed the game, but not about that. And whatever I know, I will not be saying. But this just happens to be not something I have any knowledge about. I just think it tracks, and I think it makes sense. So, that was one of the big ones. Another one is coming soon, but that was one of the big ones. I believe huge changes are coming for the Get of Fenris. Going back to the chat, we have It's a Valid Theory. Stanel thinks like what we've just said. But in terms of vote, oh, thank you, chat, for writing vote before. That's cool. It helps me find it. Wow, thank you. Please keep doing that. I really, really like that. I was only asking. So we've got 2 votes there. I'm going to use that. I rolled my eyes. It was only a question. It's not like I wanted to join the cursed tribe. For a moment, we all were silent. I needed to know more about tribes, or there were a lot of werewolves there. Terraria says, one of the big ones I helped find / I feel important. Yes, actually, thank you for pointing it out. because I couldn't see the entire other stream of the other lady whose name I keep forgetting. I really apologize. Um, I couldn't watch the whole thing because I had another stream to watch, right? The one I never miss that I watch each week, which is Eddie Webb's stream where we play classic adventure games. It's awesome. I really, really love that stream, and I will never miss it for the whole world if I can avoid it. So I didn't see the end, but Terraria was nice enough to, when he saw that happening, point it out to me in a private message on Discord and make sure that I knew the timestamp of her vid so I can go back and check. So I will definitely be doing that, hopefully by next week, so I can get back to you on that if there is something else that I see. But absolutely, I'm on that track of that because Terraria pointed it out to me. So yes, thank you very much, sir. Terraria says more about the tribe. That's his votes. Can I post her channel URL here? Sure, go right ahead. I do not see myself in competition with any other streamers. The streaming community, actually, from what I've seen so far, are actually pretty chill. I'm friends with several streamers now, and all of them are pretty damn cool people. Some of them I even consider friends. So, frankly, I have zero issues if I can help getting someone seen, then I'm just happy to help another streamer. Just let's all help each other. All the way. Go for it. Stanel says a lot of werewolves. Okay, so we've got 2 opposing votes, and Terraria is just asking out of respect. I appreciate that completely. Yes, it was the right thing for you to ask. I'm just saying, go for it. So we've got 2 opposing votes. I have not heard Nomad for a bit, so I will assume... No, he was there for the family tribe bit, but I've been talking for probably half an hour since then. Going to assume that only the 2 of you... No, Nomad's there. No more about the tribe. Okay, good. I wanted to learn more about the tribes and find an option that would really resonate with who I was. So here we have, I talked with Kim, I talked with Danielle, I talked with Lisa, or I talked with Pat. Is Danielle still super friendly, or did we fuck it up with the get question? Danielle is friendly. Yes. Kim... Where's Kim? Kim neutral? Lisa... Well, actually, it's easier if I just look... Does anyone hate us? No. Okay, cool. That's important because talking to someone who you don't like costs willpower. That's super cool. It's like the game telling you that it's an effort for you to talk to this person that you don't like. It's like you're forcing yourself to doing it even though you really don't want to. So that's why it costs willpower. It's something I spoke about in my review of the game, which I still find to be pretty damn awesome. So we have a 1 vote for Danielle and another one for it's next to the options. These are the options. Rage is next to the options. I'm not sure I'm following you, my friend. We have a vote for Danielle, a vote for Pat. We will be doing them all anyway. So... Oh, you mean... Right. Wow. Yes, I'm a dumbass. Absolutely, right. I was looking everywhere to see if anyone hated us, and it's right there. It's... Wow, I'm a dumbass. Yes, thank you, Terraria. So we've got 2 votes for Danielle, 1 for Kim. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do them all anyway, but I'm going to go with the order that the chat prefers. So we're going to start with Danielle, then we're going for Pat, and then we'll see about the other 2. I asked Danielle if I could join his tribe, but he didn't understand the question. I'm Red Talon, he said, as if it explained everything. What exactly were Red Talons, or I started, there's a missing T, to get who he was. I think I'll veto this one because I want the lore to come out, so let's go with this. What are the red talons? I asked Danielle. It is the tribe of the Garu who were born as wolves, Daniel explained. We usually don't mix with others, and we kill humans. But since I'm the only one here, I decided it was better to join the rest. See, we talked about this before. Another thing the game got flack for is that Danielle did not feel like a red talon because people think red talons keep killing everyone. Well, here he says it. Normally I probably would have, but everyone here would hate me for it, so I'm being diplomatic about it. It's not like a compulsion. I don't wake up every morning thinking, hey, I'm gonna munch a baby today. No, that's not how they work. So once again, I'm backing the developers here entirely about the Daniel depiction, about the Red Talon depiction of Daniel. But I'm still hoping we're gonna get the part where apparently he regrets making that decision of tolerating humans while he was there with the other people. And I guess this choice right here is where we get it, probably. The why question might get us there. Like, it was a wise decision. Maybe he's going to say, actually, no, I think it sucked. I don't know. Both of those options might get us what we want. So we have to choose wisely here, people. So Terraria says, why? Which I also believe is the best choice to get what we want. But I will follow the chat. Terraria says, I know how you get it because the other streamer got it. Really? So the other streamer just got everything I ever wanted in her first stream. Okay, so if we know for a fact that why is how we get it, I'm gonna veto this. I mean, if we know, we know. Why? I kept asking. He looked at me as if I were stupid. Are you stupid? He asked a second later. There's always strength in numbers. I protect my folk better when there are more werewolves around. Your folk? Wolves. I started to get who he was, or that's all I wanted from him. Okay, so essentially, no, actually, no. We don't get the, it was a wise decision before. Oh, we already missed it, really. Stanel says, why will just state the obvious. Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood Terraria on that one. Who just says we've already missed it. Dang it. So do me a favor, Terraria. On the second playthrough, if you can, subtly try to get us to it, that would be cool. Because I want to know. Or actually, you know what? I will watch her stream. If you say she got it, I will watch the whole damn thing, I guess. Okay, cool. So in that case, I apologize to Stanil. I vetoed something I shouldn't have. My apologies. So we have a vote for started to get who he was. And yes, this one I will choose because it's an optional option at this point. Eventually, we're going to have to pick that's all we wanted and move on to someone else. So I'm going to go with this. Daniel sniffed the air. His nostrils moved in a very non-human way. I was looking, enthralled. Was he a wolf? Are you a wolf? I asked. He made a face. We all are. It's not what I meant. Or I could see what he wanted to say. Oh. Terraria says, spoilers, you have to get the one guy killed. I think I know who he means by that. Interesting. So we have to get... Sure, I'll go ahead and say it because we've already established a couple of things between these two. So we have to get Carnell killed, is what I'm understanding here, because it was established that they knew each other, maybe even were friendly, and that was the bit I was... One of the bits I was curious about, because as I said, it was a bit weird that a Red Talon considered himself going so far as to say friendly with a human. So, interesting. Yeah, too late for that then. Vote see what he meant. And another vote is I'm sorry. First vote, Stanil says started to get who he was. Oh, it's Stanil that is voting for both. Well, you gotta get it. You gotta choose, my dear. Which one do you want? This one's all you. I'm gonna pick your vote. Your vote. Terraria says, vote Stanil. I feel bad. Why? Don't feel bad, bro. You did nothing wrong. I just took a couple of things for granted and I jumped to conclusions that weren't there. It's all on me. Oh, wait, actually. Started to get who he was the previous choice. My apologies, I went too far back. Okay, so her actual vote was see what he meant. So do you mean I could see what he wanted to say by see what he meant? Because that's not... Right, see meant. Wait, no. Because meant is part of the first choice and see is part of second choice. My apologies, my dear, but it's not clear. Because if it was he meant and Maya's a she, that can't be it, right? She clearly... Let's see what he meant was for... Could see, okay. So Daniel is now loyal, interesting. You're right, I agreed. We run and hunt together, but my experiences were different than yours. He tilted his head and looked at me. Yes, I was born a wolf. And then, when it turned out I was not only a wolf, I was disgusted, you know? Going around on two legs, soft and helpless. Who really wants that? I didn't want to have anything to do with humans. But Lisa comes one day and she talks to me and she brings me to Olga, and I think, well, they are not that bad and they have stuff. Stuff is nice. I like stuff. He sniffed on the wind again. I never got that bit. Besides, he said, I can show them the pushta, the way I see it, the way the wolf sees it. Once they see it like that, they never come back to the old ways. That was all I wanted from him. Thanks, that was all I wanted from him. See there, that was great Red Talon role-playing, actually. There's a lot of examples in the book of Red Talons actually being cool with people, even humans. They just want to protect the wilds. Their factual goal is not to kill humans. It's killing humans is a way to evacuate their hatred, sure, but it's a means to an end. Ultimately, they're just trying to save the wilds, and humans keep encroaching and encroaching and encroaching and killing more and more species. So it's not surprising to have a Red Talon meet some people and go, huh, these people are cool. There's a couple of things they're doing that I think is nice, and I like that, and why not give it a chance? Red Talons do that. They do. Not saying all of them do. I'm saying it's a completely valid way of playing them. I believe Pat was the second choice, so we're going to go with that. Pat was a glass walker, and her tribe was finding its niche in cutting edge, technological cityscapes among the strands of the weaver's net. It sounded intriguing. We talked for a while. Glasswalker, an adaptable tribe of urban human lovers who worship the weaver, or at least freely uses its tools to fight the worm, hated by the other tribes for their willingness to abandon the old ways and embrace the tools of the enemy. Yeah, that's completely true. The weaver, manifestation and symbol of order and pattern. I didn't say that a bit before, but uh, humans are considered to be tools of the weaver, and by extension, their technology as well. Humans explore and catalog and understand things. We are completely, well, almost completely creatures of the weaver. The cataloging and defining of things is essentially what the weaver does, right? Spiritually speaking, that creates stasis. So we're definitely creatures of the weaver. But by extension, that also makes us tools of the worm. That was a big thing I forgot to mention before. Remember when I said earlier on that the worm is trapped inside of the greatest tool and the greatest influence of the weaver, the pattern web itself. So I believe it's in the book of the weaver that they actually explain that, if I'm not mistaken. But that's why we have so much pollution and so much corruption in cities, right? Everywhere the weaver goes now, everywhere the weaver goes now, the worm in one form or another is there too. Whenever the weaver extends their influence, inside of it there's a little strand of worm influence following along and spreading. That's one of the big reasons why humans are so problematic in the world of darkness, and one of the reasons why I can't completely blame the Red Talon. We are fucking things up, we are polluting, we are destroying the wilds, we are killing races. It's a thing, and we're not doing that because we're weaver tainted. The weaver creates stasis, not destruction. The worm destroys. That is something we're doing because of the worm's influence. So there. They're not completely wrong. Humans are, unfortunately, tainted. Terraria says, it is a little sad Daniel is the only lupus to show better what he meant by a tribe of wolves. Not that all lupus are red talon, but they are a tribe of lupus. That's true. Would have been nice to have more lupus characters, and it would also be cool if one day, I don't know, if we get another episode or a DLC or something, to have a lupus protagonist. I would really, really like that. Terraria says, I don't like that description. I think he means a glasswalker. Unfortunately, it is factual. In the sense that, once again, some of these texts are more interested in portraying how the tribe is perceived rather than how they are. And they are hated by other tribes for their willingness to abandon the old ways and embrace the tools of the enemy. That's entirely how they are seen by most of the other tribes. They're very close with the Bone Gnawers and the Children of Gaia, but most of the other tribes just look at them and going like, why, bro? Just, you're doing everything wrong. They're not liked. They're just not liked. I know it is factual. I still don't have to like it. Fair. Completely fair. Completely fair. So we've got it sounded intriguing. We talked for a while. What was she doing in the forests? She didn't look like a werewolf at all. Or how did you get a spirit patron anyway? So let's see what the chat has to say about that. It's getting a bit late, so I want to go through all of the tribe things. So for now, I'm going to do with whatever comes first. Spirit Patron it is. How did you get Winter Weasel to be your patron? I was curious. I caught it, said Pat. Or rather, I made sure it would have more to eat with me than alone. That's how you catch weasels. Terraria says, "Oh no, I take back my vote." Well, too late, my friend. Sanil was voting for the forest. Again, sorry, I have to get things moving. It's almost 10, and I really want to at least go through all of the tribe bit tonight, and there's gonna be more coming up. It's a big one tonight, as I mentioned. And this is one of them, actually. Patron, a spirit joined to a pack or tribe and representative of its inner nature. Normally, the correct term should be totem. That is the term being used by the werewolf books. However, totem is not used in this game. And totem itself is a problematic term because it has ties to specific cultures. So it's not super nice towards them, not super respectful, and it is kind of cultural appropriation. So while the term is not the official term, and online what was said publicly is that patron was the developers, specifically the developers' preferred term. So no, I don't think that this is actually a hint for a change in W5. I think this is a judgment call made by the developers to change the term to something less problematic, and that's the term they chose. Then again, they needed to have approval from the World of Darkness team to get this printed, right? Or actually produced, shipped, and released. So I'm pretty sure the World of Darkness team is aware of that change and are okay with it. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use it, but they're for sure okay with it. I hope they do. I like it. It's a tad confusing because if you rewind way earlier in the conversation, I mentioned that patron is already a thing in the World of Darkness. The sun or the moon or Queen Ananassa are patrons. Patron is a specific thing in the lore, and they are the spirits who are totems of entire breeds, essentially, for lack of a better explanation. I see no problem with merging the two concepts. You could use patron for both. It would just essentially now mean exactly that now Luna is the totem of the werewolves, and that's perfectly fine. I think I would personally prefer that option to keeping the word totem. If that's what the World of Darkness team wants to do, I'm 100% behind them. If they go with something else, we'll talk about it then. Terraria says, change fetish while you're at it, please. I don't like the idea of that being the only word someone hears from me RPing. And also because Odomod. Yes. That's actually cultural appropriation as well, actually. That's Vodun term, if I'm not mistaken. It's African. It's, African. I don't know sorry. It's from one of the cultures of Africa. I don't know the exact one, unfortunately. My knowledge is not good enough for me to pinpoint exactly where it's from. But the point is that it's specific to one culture and it's appropriation. So yes, I would also, I don't have a better term for it, unfortunately. But it would be a good idea to change it for sure. I just realized I've been saying it's 9:30. So it's almost been 3 hours because I started at 7. So yes, I definitely have to rush through the rest. Okay, let's do this. That's how you catch weasels. Because believe it or not, there's still a lot to say, and I have 10 minutes to say it. So let's move on. Was she a forest spirit? But it is a forest spirit, isn't it? I think it's a weasel. So it gets accustomed to live where there is food, and right now it's the city. It hunts electricity spirits these days and feasts on them. What was she doing in a forest? I will choose that because chat previously mentioned they wanted that one. So you are basically a city dweller, I observed. All glasswalkers are. It's our natural habitat. I feel quite out of place in a forest. Um, Chat, the first option I will take, but the Pushta was our home, or that got my interest. First one for the win. Eating other spirits? Yeah, that's one of the many ways they share noses, but yeah. Pat is now neutral. Why? I couldn't understand. The Pushta is our home. It may be your home, she said. And suddenly I realized we had less in common than I thought. I'm more of a city girl, she added. We use the weaver to fight the worm, and the forest is not the weaver's domain, and I happen to be quite fond of humanity. They have great potential. She didn't look like a werewolf at all. I will pick that as well, might as well. I wouldn't take you for a werewolf, you know, I said to Pat. She snorted. Why? She looked harmless, or she was a tech nerd. I think this one's more insulting than the other one, so in the interest of maybe not losing more reputation, I will try this. Oh, she was sympathetic. Good. Because, you know, no offense here, you're a tech nerd. I took some time before she stopped laughing. Well, she said, and wiped tears from her eyes. I am. And I didn't expect to turn out a werewolf either. I was a student, happy with my tablet and coding, and then boom, I was a Garou. How did she meet Cornell? I was curious. I was in his first back. We were both hanging out with the hacktivist crowd back then. When things went south and he disappeared, I found him. How? What happened exactly? Seems like a good use of willpower to get more information on Cornell. We're gonna do this. You said that things went south, I pressed on. What happened exactly? Our pack was killed strictly because we were following Cornell's plan, said Pam. And she still followed him? And yet you're still following him? I couldn't believe my ears. We both learned a lot, she said. And we have a good working relationship, she sighed. You know, he is stunning. He makes a great impression. The first, the fifth, the 10th as well. But he's not a leader, if you know what I mean. I didn't. I didn't know how to answer. Well, a true leader puts his pack first, and himself second. And Cornell makes great first impressions. I had to think it over. So he's a horrible alpha, is what she's saying. For a children of Gaia, because that's what he is, it's weird. But why not? I finally stopped asking. I had to think over what I'd learned. So we still have Kim or Lisa. At rank 5 Hamid. Gift. There's many gifts, my friend. You please be more specific. Also, you're talking to mostly a Lupus player, so I have to admit I'm not as familiar with high-level Hamid gifts. But we have a vote for Kim, so I'm gonna go there. Kim told me about the Bone Gnawers, urban werewolves fighting for the disadvantaged and the marginalized, children of the rat. Bone Gnawers. They stand for the rights of the poor and the disenfranchised everywhere, making their homes in favelas, squats, and camps, hated by the other tribes because they act like tame dogs, eating the scraps of the human table. Not accurate. Well, I mean, other tribes do look down on them, mostly because they don't care about status, which is super important for other tribes. And I mean, they live in filth. They tend to live with the disenfranchised, essentially, as it says here. They're good people. They're really good people, actually. The Belnauer stages don't tend to have access to showers and things like that, and that makes other people look down on them, which is problematic in its own right. But nevertheless, the state of things. However, they don't see them as tame dogs eating the scraps of the human table, although they kind of do, eating from um, dumpsters and things like that. They do that, but I mean, not all of them. Some of them do. Some of them just find it more practical. Um, but they definitely have a spine. The Bonauers cannot be seen as people who are lap dogs or tame in any way. Uh, they don't care about status, but that doesn't mean they're going to tolerate others telling them that they're worthless or below them. They just don't think there should be status, but that doesn't mean status doesn't piss them off. It really, really does. They really don't like Silverfangs, for example. They've started wars over this. Think in Russia, the Romanovs, the revolution that happened over there, that was a thing that the Bonauers orchestrated with Brujas, essentially, which are a clan of vampires who are all about rebellion as well. The two of them united and rebelled in Russia a long time ago, and it didn't work too well, unfortunately, but that was the plan. And that was mostly because the Bonauer tried to overthrow the Silverfangs, who were in power in Russia at the time. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't exactly go with exactly that description, but it's not completely wrong. That's how they're seen, I guess. Did they really have rats as a patron, or I asked them? I asked Kim about their story. The one that makes you a walking god. First impression. Sorry, I do not follow you again, my friend. I also wanted to discuss why while Terraria explains, so I can maybe comment. One of the only tribe where they mention who the patron is Rat. I don't know why that is. The patrons of the tribes are super cool, and it would have been nice to have a bit more information on that. Earlier, I said we know enough about the Umbra, but I don't think we know enough about the spirits in it. And the totems or the patrons, I think, would have been a pretty cool addition. Um, at least to name them. And a lot of the tribes are not named. I think Pegasus is named. If earlier in the conversation, if we'd said, "Hey, Olga, come on, be my mentor," she would have told us about the Black Furies, because that's what she is. She's a Black Fury, and give and mention a little bit about Pegasus. Not a lot, but a little bit. But here we don't have a lot to go on about Red either, unless we click here, which I hope the chat. I will send it to you tomorrow. Okay, cool. Oh, the rank. Sorry, I spoke so much I forgot. Okay, the rank 5 Hamid is the one that makes you a walking gun. Sure, we can talk about that tomorrow. That's perfectly fine. Because I want to try to finish this. So, did they really have Rat as a patron, or I asked Kim about their story? I'm gonna go with the rat thing because that's one of the only totem that gets some explanation, so I want you to see it. Do you really have a rat as the tribe patron? I asked. Sure we do, Kim answered. It's a very good patron, resilient. You want to be like a rat, always managing, always afloat. And that is why patrons are cool. All of patrons of a tribe come with a philosophy. that all of the tribes follow. They are being taught essentially by their totems, right? Um, so that's why I think it would be nice if we had a bit more about each tribes, because it's cool to say this tribe does this tribe does that, but you don't really understand a tribe until you understand what their patron is and what their patron stands for. Why do bone gnawers live in filth? Because that's one way to test their resilience. Everything ties together. They're not living there because it's fun. They're living there because the people they want to protect lives there, yes, but also because the people who live there are really fucking resilient people surviving out in the cold. I would not survive a winter in the cold. I can tell you right now. I mean, sure, I'm in Canada, so I mean, minus 40 is a thing that happens over here for sure. But there are people, homeless people, who do survive that, and I can only respect the fuck out of them for managing that. And that's what Rat is all about. Rat is about surviving extreme conditions. Rat always finds a way to survive. That's what he teaches his children's, and that is what the Bone Gnawers are actually all about. Just as for, let's talk about the Glasswalker. Terraria is actually one step ahead of me on this one. Cockroach is about adaptability. Rat survives by pure resilience. Cockroach survives with adaptability. That's not really what cockroaches do, but that's what he teaches. But let's see what Terraria says. Cockroach invade everything and survive everything. Well, yeah, essentially. It's a different version of surviving everything. Again, Rat does it by resilience. Cockroach does it by preaching evolution and adaptation. Hence why the Glasswalker are all about humans, because that's what we do, humans. We learn, we adapt, we evolve, we develop new things. That's why the Glasswalker have always been about mankind. Before they were known as the Glasswalker, they were known as the Shepherds of Men. And in between, they were called also the Iron Riders in the era where trains were a big thing, and establishing railroads was important. That was the very personification of advancement at the time. It was the big thing at the time. And the Glasswalker were all over that because that's what their totem is all about. Totems are a big thing, yo. Spirituality is a big thing in Werewolf. And until you understand that and learn all of that, there's a lot you're going to miss about particularly the tribes. And that's one of the big reasons why I keep saying it's not a game about rage. It's not a game about violence and murder and all of that. It's a game about spirituality and balance. And until you acknowledge that and dig deep into that, you're missing 80% of the game. Terraria says, not just punching Pentex. No, indeed. And I won't open again with the Weaver and the Wyland why they're problematic, but they each have elements that are just as problematic as Pentex is. Well, I guess I will, but I'll keep it short. Like, for example, the Weaver has a corporation, just like Pentex, who is called DNA. I forget what the letters stand for, but something amalgamated. And they are all about studying, cataloging things that don't want to be studied in catalog, like werewolves. They dabble in genetics, and they're a really huge thorn in the back of werewolves the world over because they tend to kidnap them and try to run experiments on them, which is not cool. But also going back with the idea of blanket statements, I'd like DNA to be part of the W5 core book. Please, come on. The worm is not the only problem here. Every member of the triad have interesting things you can plug, interesting enemies that you can you can use in your game, mention those, please. Like, literally, DNA didn't exist until Book of the Weaver, which came out in the, I think, what, last 5 years before the game line ended. That's very late to introduce the Weaver as a potentially problematic enemy as well. And later than that came out the Book of the Wild, where we learned, well, actually, the wild is not your friend, which is, I think, my favorite quote in the book. The wild is not your friend. Before that book came out, most of the books made it appear like the werewolves were siding with the wild because the wild was, well, poorly defined at that point. And it just seemed like the other two were problematic, but not the wild. And the Book of the Wild came up and said, no, the wild is on its own side. It's not nature, because we tended to imagine forests as being of the wild. And therefore, since werewolves were protecting nature, they were natural allies. Well, no, not really. Werewolves are protecting wild areas and wild influences because they're trying to bring back balance. And right now, the Weaver and the Worm are here, and the wild is just being bashed by everyone all the time. So he's like, nothing is balanced. So they're trying to help the wild and hamper the other one so that we eventually maybe get back to something that's a bit balanced. But the wild is not your friend. That's what you need to remember. The wild is the least sentient of all three, and he doesn't care. He's random, he's chaos, he's undefinable, he's very dangerous. He will do whatever he wants, and that can be to suddenly decide, well, he can't breathe air anymore. Why? I just thought about it. Thought it'd be cool. It's just how it is. And that's actually one of the reasons why the wild is problematic. There are areas in the world called abscesses, I believe they're called. That's been a while, and I did not expect to talk about that tonight, but I think that's what they're called. The areas where the gauntlet is very, very thin, but aren't actually cairns. It's just areas where specifically wild energies are so strong that they're punching through the gauntlet. And they create areas where laws of physics and logic don't really apply that well anymore. For example, you have the Fountain of Youth in the books that's referred to one of these areas. You can drink this water and you're gonna get younger. That makes zero sense, but it's known as a spot where an abscess occurred. Sadly, most of the examples in the book are not that bad, but the book presents these places as potentially really, really bad. It's not a problem that you're gonna get younger. It's fine. That one's cool. But places where gravity is no longer a thing, you walk somewhere and just go into space, my friend. Bye bye. That's a huge problem. And werewolves will fight back against locations like this just as much as they will against the Weaver or the Worm influenced places. Each of the members of the triads have entire books devoted to them to show you how you can use them as a source of drama or as a source of problems in a game to inspire a story from it, essentially. And that's something that really, I believe, should be in the books from the get-go. Just widening our horizons. So, Terraria says, my wild/Gaia misunderstanding. Well, it's not entirely clear, even for me. I mean, I know from the book that forests and nature are not actually wild things, wild aspected things, but they also are. I'm very not clear on that. Even now, after decades of reading werewolf books, even I'm still confused about why aren't forests wild, because they're being treated as such in every other book. But the Book of the Wild tries to convince you that it's not that simple. I never really got the distinction myself. So they kept talking, because we still have a couple of tribes to go through. That's why the Bone Gnawers protect every single Gaia's child, no matter how small, because we are all valid. They sighed heavily. Now, tell it to the other Garu, and they look down at you because you're Bone Gnawer, and they think they're superior. Prejudice, prejudice everywhere. I talked with Lisa. And here we get to the other big reveal of tonight, the part I really wanted to get to before we stopped the stream. I asked Lisa about her tribe, but she inherited our Sibarak legacy from her Bariat grandfather. She said I didn't know the proper legends, customs, and culture to join. This is fucking huge. And I never read this before, so I'm gonna do this now. Their hate, sorrow, and rage are deeper than any other tribes because their icy Siberian homeland is melting and decaying. Now they are despised by the other tribes as half-breed loners who care only for themselves. Okay. Don't know what they're referring to by the half-breed loners part, but okay. Sibaraks are not one of the 13 tribes in the Garu Nation. They're not in the Beast Court, they're not in the Hadi, they're not. Well, they're not. well, no, okay. They exist, but they're barely mentioned in the books. I believe there are 2 paragraphs about them in Rage Across Russia, and that's all I know about them. They may be more defined in another book that I don't know about, but the point is, we barely know anything at all about this Sibarak. They come from Siberia, like it said here. They're an offshoot, apparently, of either the Silver Fang or the Wendigos. Not clear. And they don't let anyone into their territories. That's all we know, or at least that's all I know of the Sibarak. Terraria says Sibarak were half Silver Fang. I guess because they're kind of half Silver Fang, half Wendigo, I suppose is what they mean. But once again, that doesn't mean anything. Tribes are not really a blood thing. So, I mean, you're chosen by your totem, so you're a member of that tribe, right? You can have pure breed of a certain tribe, but pure breed isn't super compatible. You're not going to have pure breed of 2 different tribes. So being half one in half other doesn't work as a concept in Werewolf. So I never got where they were going with it in terms of the Sibarak being kind of both. And I really hope one day we're going to see more about it. And it looks like we will. Because here, we have a character that is actually a Sibarak. She's not in Siberia. She left. And they don't do that. And she did. And I'm going to dig a bit into that because there's something she says later on that is big. Was Sibarak a Russian word? So I asked, not sure how to approach the topic. Sibarak? I mean, you're from Siberia, I hesitated. And Lisa smirked. But the tribe name reminds me of something. Yes, Siberak. She pronounced it differently. It sounded like a Polish word. I must have heard it before, but wasn't the word Russian? Why are you saying it that way, I asked. I thought the word was Russian. In Russian, it means someone from Siberia. But in Polish, it has its own very specific meaning, Lisa explained. It's a word for political prisoners exiled to Siberia. And there were tens of thousands of them. So why was she using the name? Even if it had such loaded meaning, I couldn't understand. Lisa sighed. My tribe name describes both of my legacies. My granny was a political exile and my grandpa was a Siberian indigenous. I use it because it speaks the truth. I'm gonna waste a willpower here because I want her to say what I'm trying to get her to say. So how did you get here, I asked. A long story, she sighed. Well, I came through here in search of a better life. Through the forest, illegal. I still wait for my papers to be stored. She wasn't exactly hiding. Aren't you afraid they'll catch you? You're not, I searched for words. You're not exactly hiding, I said finally. Nah, Lisa shrugged. You know I do things here and there. Help with the tourists, help with the forests, and my moonshine is the best in this province. How did she become a werewolf? I thought she was going to say it. Dang it. Okay, let's try this. Maybe that's where she does. My grandpa saw that I had a soul of a wolf and started teaching me about the spirit world. She looked at me with her violet eyes. When the time was right, he guided me through the change. That's cool. Yeah, I remember that. I brought up the points at some point, not in this chat, but online. You don't really get guided through the change. Change is a violent thing that just kind of happens, and not for Garuborn and not for certain breeds, but for werewolves of the Hamid breed, something eventually scares you too much, or you get pissed off too much, and you just frenzy. The fact that she was guided through the change is interesting. Not purely against it. I mean, why wouldn't one or two werewolves get away with it, I suppose? It could happen. A storyteller could definitely decide you're different. Your first change was not a violent thing. Someone found a way to guide you through it. Or it could be a hint that W5 has changed its view on that. I don't know. Stenel says it depends. For Thurges, it can be different. You mean a vision-based change? Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. Yeah, I'll grant that point. There is canonical exception to that rule. Okay. No, yeah, right. You're right. And she is a Thurge. I mean, it's not clear, but I think she's a Thurge. Okay. Well pointed out, Stenel. I will absolutely give you that point. Thank you very much for correcting me. I was in the wrong. Thank you. She also says, I think she's a Thurge, if I remember correctly, my first game. Yeah, that's my feeling as well. I'm not sure I remember it, but it's the feeling she's giving us, especially now with all these mention of spirits. So, yeah. I can choose that either I don't remember my grandpa, or my grandpa also helped. Really? Terraria says we can look. No, not Kim. Lisa. Lisa's what I'm looking for. Olga's girlfriend. She had a perfect hourglass figure, long braids, and the most stunning cheekbones. Her eyes, slightly slanted, were a weird shape of blue, deep, almost purple. One of Garu, born in Russia and of Belarusian Buryat descent. She was in Poland illegally. No mention of her osmos. But I do believe that she is absolutely... I do believe she's a Thurge. I'm going to choose my grandpa also help me because I'm hoping we're going to get more out of this. She's now sympathetic. I realized that I had more in common with Lisa than I previously thought. My grandpa was telling me stories about the Pushta, I said, and I think that made me who I am now. Oh, he did more than that. He must have told you about the Garu, Lisa said. How else would you know the High Tongue? That was a good question. The language of the Garu depends as much on body language and tones as on actual words. Much of it is instinctive, accented by pheromones, growls, and whines. I have a problem with this, actually. Because, well, not a problem. Let me rephrase that. It's been said in the books several times actually, that the Garutong is instinctive. It just is. So you never need to learn it. From the moment you have your first change, maybe even before that, as we've discussed in the past, that's not been clear. But definitely, at least from your first change, you understand the Garutong. You just do. So here they're going in a different direction. And once again, the developers of this game know what they are talking about. They really do. I don't think this is an accident. And I don't think the change to high tongue is also an accident. Actually, high tongue was used before, I think, in the really earliest editions. It just eventually got morphed into the Garutong. And I think it's going back to the high tongue. That's my theory. I think this is another hint for W5. They're going back to the term high tongue, and I think it's no longer instinctual. I Again, it's a guess, but it's the only way to make sense of this. Once again, giving credit to the developers knowing Werewolf very well, which they do. I don't think they would make that mistake. That was a good question. That was all I wanted from her. Dang it, she did not say it. Thanks, that was all I needed to know at the moment. Okay, so I'm gonna have to go there myself. In one of my playthroughs, she specifically mentioned that the Sibarak had started to spread. They're no longer essentially hiding behind ice walls in Siberia. They are now spreading around the world. So my theory, the third big reveal in terms of tribes, is that Sibarak will now be playable. It may tie into the Wendigo tribes. I think in 5th edition they're going to try to get rid essentially of the tribes that have a bad rep, and revamp them in a way that works better and won't insult cultures that are still alive and thriving today and that are deserving of respect. The Wendigo tribe is not well liked among First Nations, from what I understood. I'm not myself a First Nation, so I will not be speaking on their behalf, but I've seen evidence that they're seen as problematic. Much of that comes specifically from the name itself. Wendigo, in culture, pop culture essentially, is just seen as a monster, something that just eats hearts, or a variation of that. And the perception seems to be that naming the main tribe, who is First Nation, after a monster is racist, essentially. I won't get into it any further than that. I do not have the proper perspective or the proper knowledge to properly convey the situation. But the point is, the name is seen as problematic, and the tribe itself as well. Personally, I think they did something pretty cool in a book known as Croatan's Song. They gave a lot more lore about the Wendigo in there, that was just not in the core books or even in the two Wendigo tribe books. And it depicts a very different tribe, and I think that was their attempt, because Croatan's Song came out pretty late in the printing of the books. I think that was an attempt to fix that, but just like the Fenrir, it was too little too late. The image was already there, and the damage was already done. So my personal theory is that just like the Geta Fenris, the Wendigo might be going away and will be replaced by the Sibarak, who are half Silverfang, half Wendigo essentially. So they might be able to have still a tribe that is ice themed, like the Wendigos were, without the problematic elements that came with the Wendigo. Sounds like a potentially good move, but I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. As Terraria said before, in the original version of W5, they had a person on the team who was knowledgeable of these things, and he was the one who was working on the Wendigos to solve the problem essentially. And he didn't carry over to the new team. Is what Terraria said. I'm not personally aware of that. I learned it at the same time as you in the chat. So I don't know where they're going with this. Maybe my theory is correct. Maybe they're doing something else entirely now. Or maybe I'm just completely wrong. That was never the plan. I don't know. But as far as this game is concerned, and as far as the first plan were, I think that's what they were going for. In the spirit of picking this game apart for hints, I think that was a huge one. Let's see. It being something you have to learn means there will be even more of a split between the Hamid and Lupus. That isn't a good thing. I'm not sure that was in reply to what. I've been talking for a long time again, sorry. Must be something I said that prompted that response. So I again apologize. I speak too much. I should check the chat earlier so I can figure out what the chat is responding to. My apologies. But we got through the big bits that I wanted to get through tonight. Let's see. Let's continue a little bit more, so we can at least completely finish the tribe part. But that was the big one. Terraria says, but then there needs to be a First Nation tribe. Yes, that will be for the Cold tribe, but we shouldn't have less First Nation tribes. Oh, okay. Stanel says about the high tongue. Okay, so it being something you have to learn means there will be even more of a split between the Hamid and Lupus. That isn't a good thing. He was talking about the high tongue, right? That's a damn good point, actually. That is a damn good point. If I had to venture a guess, I think that they just didn't like the fact that it was instinctual and that didn't make much sense to them, so they just wanted to get away with it. Get away from it, I mean. It's a tongue that you need to learn now, and you can probably play without it. But it's true, however, it means that if you have a Lupus and a Hamid in the same pack, they will not have any tongues in common. Unless we assume somehow that the Lupus just learns English or whatever local tongue is. Personally, I'm against that. As a Lupus player myself, I tend to prefer to play Lupus who don't speak the language, as Terraria can attest really well. Because learning a damn language is not easy, especially when you have 0 reference points to things like punctuations and anything like that. It's not easy for a wolf who suddenly becomes a man. They have the mental faculties for it, sure, but it should not be taken for granted that they've learned a language as cubs. If you're not playing the Rite of Passage, if you're playing actual triats, I'm okay with it, because presumably the character, he or she has been a werewolf for at the very least a year or two. Already being a sponge, learning everything there is to learn to become a werewolf, so throwing a language in there, I don't mind. But don't brush it off. Don't just assume Lupus characters learn or care to learn. Like a Red Talon, for example, very unlikely that they would give a shit about learning a human language. Eventually, maybe they'll figure out, hey, maybe I should know my enemy. I should be able to understand what they're saying around the campfire. If I'm to learn anything about what they're doing there, or if there's a Pentex group nearby, yes. But as a new character, a new class that just had their first change, it's not likely that they're there yet. So I agree with Terraria that if they're going with the high tongue needs to be learned, I think that's a step backward. With all due respect to anyone on the World of Darkness team that might be reading this, do what you want, of course, obviously. It's your game, and I respect you and what you're doing and your decisions. As someone who plays Lupus pretty much all the time, this will not help us. Is what it essentially is. It will just make things a bit harder for us. It's cool for roleplay opportunities for Hamids though. Having to learn this weird mystical language. It's super cool, and I get why it can be a good thing. But I think it comes with other bad sides as well. Terraria says, I can attest. It's fun, but it gives my character a headache. Yep. We're in a werewolf game every Tuesdays. He's the only Hamid in the pack. He's in a pack with 2 Lupus characters. Yeah, he's got headaches. For sure. All the time. Okay. It's almost 11, so let's get through this. One thing is bugging me, I said. Why are there so many of you here? Suddenly everyone in Białowieża is a werewolf or what? You know nothing, cub, Olga laughed bitterly. A mere century ago there were dozens of packs in the forests. But none of the old guard survived the 90s, Lisa shook her head. Oh, sorry. It's now Lisa. We had to start from scratch. Until you showed up. There were only 6 of us, and the 3 of us not even local, Colonel pointed out. 2 packs too small for their own good. Anyway, before you're admitted to a tribe, you need to prove yourself. What now? Prove myself? I was shocked. Hadn't I proven myself enough already? No, not even close. You did nothing except run and talk to a crowd. Rite of passage. You went through your first change, Pat said. She was leaning on a tree nearby. And you know everything you need to know at the moment. But you have to go through the rite of passage. Daniel rubbed against my leg, excited. E-Vision quest. Kim winked at me. And since we don't have time for tests, we need you to solve a real problem, Olga stepped in. Namely, we want you to find a way of ending this logging problem, Colonel said gently. So, how would you like to do it? You know, earlier I said, presumably you've had a year or 2 of training? I get that for the game this is a choice they had to make. I'm not at all criticizing the game for this. I understand, and I would have made the exact same choice if I was making that game. Yes. Give me the rite of passage right away, it makes complete sense. However, canonically, after your first change, usually someone is gonna mentor you in the ways of your auspice, and when you're ready, when they judge that you know enough and that you can join the Garou Nation without embarrassing yourself, then and only then will someone start considering, hey, let's put a bunch of cubs together, do a rite of passage, and make a pack out of that. The exception being, and I didn't even look at the chat, but I'm sure Terraria has pointed that out already, the exception to that rule are the Glasswalkers. The Glasswalkers believe in trial by fire. They will put you through the day of your first change. They're going to bring you in a room, give you the basics in a couple of minutes, and then throw you out there so you can have your rite of passage. It's essentially, it's do or die with the Glasswalkers. If you can't be ready in your first 48 hours, you're not Glasswalker material. Simple as that. They call it, I think they literally call it a 48 hours challenge. But might be a compromise. Literally 2 hours. Go do your right. I hadn't. No, indeed, you had not pointed it out. However, there is a glasswalker in the group. So, again, to back the developers on this one, maybe, considering the problem that they are all going through and the fact that they can't agree on anything and there's 3 in 1 pack, there's not enough of them, they need more people, and more importantly, they need someone to break the ties. I'm thinking maybe Pat, right? Pat is the glasswalker, I think? I think she put it on the table of, you know what? Let's just get her through the rite of passage and she's going to learn what she needs to learn after. It works. It makes sense. Personally, I think it's easy to reconcile both the canon and the game if you see it that way. They all looked at me in anticipation. I took my time. The problem, though, I have with it is that it feels like choosing your tribe, or at least which totem you're going to try to get to choose you, is a big choice. And in a day or two, you won't know enough about the spiritual side of each of the tribes to make a good choice. Obviously, these people decided that she didn't need to know, which is fine, once again, because think about glasswalkers, they choose for you, literally. They pick you up and say, yep, you're going to be a glasswalker. Here's your rite of passage. Survive or die. Not everyone gets a choice. I took my time, overwhelmed by everything that happened. My old self was gone, replaced by a shape-shifting echo warrior. But deep down, I was still the same person, with the same ideas and ideals. I knew what to do. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. We just have to push the loggers a little. I had a plan to expose the loggers, or we should frame the loggers. I'll get back to the chat for this one. Because I have no preferences. The bits I wanted to go through, I have. The lore I wanted to expose, I have. So from this point out, I'm 100% going with what the chat wants, and we'll see what happens. Nomad says frame. Terraria says frame, so that's what we're going to do. But first, Terraria says, I mean, if one fails the glasswalker rite, they normally just go back to the general population. Correct. That's true, actually. If you succeed, you're stuck as a glasswalker, though. But if you fail, I mean, and you don't die, because rites of passage can absolutely kill you. Not all of them are safe. Really not. But if you survive but you failed, you did not get to join the Garou Nation. That's the nature of challenges in the Garou Nation. You lose or you win, not by your own talents, but by the whims of the spirits. So if you fail the challenge, it means the spirits, in the case, for example, of a rite of passage, are telling the world that you're not ready for your rite of passage. So the glasswalkers will essentially just let you go join another tribe where they will teach you things, and eventually you're probably going to get another shot at a rite of passage when you're actually ready for it. You just won't be a glasswalker at that point. So we are framing the loggers. Let's see how that happens. We need to frame the loggers, I decided, and then use the leverage to bring down the whole operation. Lisa rolled her eyes. You're all blind and ignore our most powerful ally. Lisa rolled her eyes. There are many ancient spirits in the Pushta, and we should talk to them. I continued with my plan. I'll lure the loggers to a protected area and record what they're doing, I continued. When it hits the internet, the authorities will have to ban the logging. Pat grinned. I know exactly the place you need. Daniel beamed, spoken like a true ragabash. You were born under a new moon, weren't you, Maya? How did he know? But first, let's see. Ragabash, those born under the new moon, are cunning tricksters and unconventional tacticians, questioning tradition in order to find the wisest path. 1000% correct. excellent description of a Ragabash. How did he know? I looked at him surprised. And how did he know? Mom always told me that when she gave birth to me, the night was so dark that she was afraid something had happened to the moon and stars, and that we were alone with the dark sky. I nodded. That's always felt weird to me in every one of my playthroughs. Like, when my mom gave birth, she was not looking at the moon, and I'm pretty sure if I called my mom right now, well, first of all, she'd be asleep, but second of all, she'd have no freaking clue what the moon was on the day of my birth. I happen to know because I checked that I'm factually born under the gibbous moon, making me a Galliard. Even though none of my playthroughs so far have made me a Galliard. She's a third, all right. Lisa, that is. Completely agreed. You're right, I nodded. How did you know? Garu born under the new moon are tricksters and questioners, said Pat. Just like you and me. We are the most cunning of them all, she winked. And our path is the perfect mix of glory, honor, and wisdom. Right. She's referring to renown. You'll notice here that we no longer have the traits, cunning, and so on because they were just there to help the game figure out what auspice we were. Because we had cunning, we ended up as a Ragabash. Now that we know our auspice, that's not important anymore. And now what matters is renown. Normally that shouldn't actually come into play until our rite of passage. Renown is the way that werewolves raise in rank. I'm not going to go into all kinds of detail because, to be perfectly blunt, I have no idea what renown does in the game. You can't raise in rank. You can become... You can get Cliath, sure. You do your rite of passage and you become a Cliath, which is rank 1. But I don't know what else renown does in the game. I guess it replaces the traits. Like, for example, if you're super glorious, it would be the equivalent we had before of the... what was the trait? Aggressive, I guess, or some such. Whereas if you're balanced, then you'll get the choices that Cunning used to give us. Or Philodox, so analytical. Then I'm not sure. But I think whichever one is strongest will now be the one that defines our choices, instead of being spiritual, analytical, and so on. Terraria says, I mean she kinfolk, so might be something kinfolk look out for. They allow a couple of out question. Oh, right. The mother might have looked at the moon because she was kinfolk. Right? No, that makes sense. That does make sense. For sure. And here she mentions glory, honor, wisdom, perfect mix. Because each of the auspices have one of the 3 types of glory, of renown they need to focus on most. The Ragabash do not. They can rank up with essentially any combination of renown type. Your place in the werewolf society will be determined by your renown. You can earn glory through defeating mighty enemies and succeeding at dangerous quests. You can earn honor by following your moral imperative and upholding the laws of the Garu. You can earn wisdom by acting efficiently and thinking well before you act. Your renown will change as you play, contributing to Maya's legend among the Garu. And that's actually a pretty good recap of what renown is. No pressure at all. I felt overwhelmed. Olga must have sensed my confusion. Come on, we have a lot to discuss. She patted my shoulder. And we have to find your phone and wallet. So I followed her. Right, because right now I'm naked. When you shapeshift, your clothes break apart. You can fix that with a certain ritual known as the Rite of the Talisman Dedication, but there's no way she knows that right. She just shifted. I nodded and followed her. I had to tie up loose ends in my old life. Back to the beginning. I'm sitting on a bus. The sun streaming through the windows is making it hard to see. The narrow roads cut through a dense old forest. My mind wanders. I remember doing something important, walking among the trees, looking for something, losing something I loved, gaining something unwanted. But then I'm fully awake and the memories gather away. We're almost there, says Anya. I did some searching. She looks at me from over her phone, and this place is amazing. The last primordial forest in Europe. I'm excited to be here. She's such a dork, or I can't be the last one. Pat gave you clothes, I believe. Oh dear. She might. She might, for sure. I'm not sure what's going on, actually. I don't even remember if I had that in my previous playthroughs, going back there. I'll just run with it. It's late, so I'm just going to pick things at this point. I don't want to finish after 11, but I do want to finish the chapter, so I'm just going to run with it. It can't be the last one. Let's just go with that. Wait. It can't be the last one, can it? I'm not able to finish. I start to cough. I spit blood. Or I try to stop. I have more health than I do willpower, so let's go with that. My throat is sore. My lungs hurt. Oh, but well, if chat has time... Sorry. This Daniel shows excited. If you have time to post before I click, I will choose what chat decides, obviously. I just won't wait for votes, because I want to move this quickly. Remember this face, by the way. Remember this face. It's gonna come back. I think I've never had this before. I'm really excited because I never knew what this face was all about. Maybe we'll find it. My throat is sore, my lungs hurt. We have a vote for a need to stop the bus, so we're gonna do that. I get up and shout to the driver, but feel something sticky in my hands and torso. Something's stopping me. Spiders! No, that's reminding me of something, actually. I think I've seen it after all. Apologies. I'm crawling with small spiders, thousands of them, weaving their cobwebs around me, around the seat, around everything. I fight! I try to get out, or I scream. Terraria says, oh, I know what this face means. Really? We'll get back to that then after chapter 6, if I don't figure it out by then. No votes, so we're gonna fight. I try to fight them, but they're too small and there are too many of them. And after a few seconds, I'm covered in cobwebs, unable to move. There is a hiss. I hear a hiss. Then slowly, a long, dark, bloody shape comes out of Anya's eye socket, pushing them out. A black snake that reeks of rotten meat, acid, and oil. Don't fight, Maya. You're already mine, it says. Just like your grandpa. And then it kisses me. What the F is going on? I forgot about this. I remember the spiders, but everything else feels new. That's weird. Maybe there's some variations of this dream depending on the playthroughs. And that sounded like a very wormish thing, like just like your grandpa. And we know that grandpa slaughtered villages. Okay, wow. Very interesting. I'll have to pay attention on the next playthroughs to figure out what this means. Right now, all I can think of is that this felt like a very wormish thing, despite the spiders, which should be weaver things. But we have a theme of being worm-tainted a bit in this particular playthrough. Once again, in this version, we had tattoos at the end of chapter 2, and a lot of them were worm-relevant. So, interesting. Something to unload when we have more time. That said, this is where we'll end. We finished chapter 4 as I wanted, and I don't want to go beyond 11, so I'm going to read up with the chat and wrap things up. Sanel says, I don't remember Grandpa either. Okay, so I'm not crazy, right? There probably are multiple visions slash dreams or things like that that you can have at the end of that chapter, depending on different choices. That's interesting. Terraria says it's the same pick as the one in the end credits on that ending, saying it now so I don't forget. Yes. In both of my playthroughs, that's the face I got in the ending credits. Absolutely. So I assume then that it's also what the other lady streamer got. So I'm thinking that's a phase that comes back at the end of every streams. But since Daniel does not remember that face or that segment with the grandfather either, I'm thinking there are probably several kinds of playthroughs where you don't have that at all until you see that face in the credits. So that's why I didn't know what it was, because it just came out of nowhere when I saw the credits. It was weird, it was freaky, and I didn't really get it. I'm thinking it's probably got some serious implications. I mean, they wouldn't have just taken that face and put it in the end credits if it wasn't important. Stenel asks, can we end up Black Spiral Dancer? Maybe. Or, because Terraria says that in the other streamers, they had that section, and that other streamer also ended up as Fenrir. So my father, the grandfather, sorry, was also Fenrir. We know our ancestry is Fenrir based. And we know they're going with the Fenrir version of they're bad. They're just evil killers and such. So if we go with that vision, assuming there will be a splinter group that are cool people, we can assume that in this version of the game, and or maybe even in W5, the Geta Fenris are considered worm tinted, maybe, without being BSD. They're at the very least influenced by the worm, could be. Stanley confirms she saw the face in the credits for sure. But I get the feeling that what she's saying is that she's not sure she saw the face before. Terraria says, no, it's something else for the Fenrir. Spoiler, you have to have negative opinion on all the guide NPCs. Yes, I know that. I'm just essentially trying to make sense of the data that we have. But yes, you are correct. But I don't think they contradict each other. We may not be in the path to become Fenrir because we have good relations with the others. So maybe we will end up Black Spiral Dancer. It's possible that there are other more than one worm-tainted options in the game. Essentially, is what I'm thinking. Or you can end up either as the offshoot of the Fenris or an actual Fenris. All of these options seem to still be in the air. We'll know more as we keep playing. But that was freaking interesting. I did not expect that face. Or I completely forgot that it's there at every playthrough. We will definitely need to pay attention in the second playthrough. Right, I'm not reading this. I'm quitting the game. So, thank you very, very, very much for hanging with me for almost 4 hours. Yeah, for 4 hours now. Wow. Sorry for keeping you all up so late. That was definitely my longest episode so far. But then I spoke for an hour about the triats. So I mean, obviously we were going to take 3 hours on a chapter because that's what we've been doing so far. So 4 hours makes sense. Sorry for keeping everyone awake. But I had a damn good time tonight. So I thank you for being here, for being active in the chat. And well, we'll see each other next week. A lot of what I had to say has been unloaded this week, so I don't have much for next time, unless there's some other news. Essentially, every Thursday, the World of Darkness team has a stream where they give news about the World of Darkness. So unless there's something big, then that I will speak about next week, it should be pretty straightforward. We're probably gonna breeze through chapter 5 and 6, which are both pretty short. And shouldn't contain any huge topics that I want to delve into uh, that I haven't already. The only thing maybe I'll go deeper into if we have the time and occasion are um, the patrons of the tribes presented in the game so far. Won't have anything to say about the Sibarak because I have no idea who their patron is. Uh, but I'm thinking it might be something that viewers would like to know because I made a big deal of patrons this episode, and I think maybe you'd like to know who all the patrons are. There are 13 tribes, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but at least the ones that are represented in this game, I think shouldn't take too much time and would probably be interesting. So, once again, thank you so very, very much for being here tonight. I had a lot of fun, and I'm very much looking forward to finishing this first playthrough and doing many, many more with all of you. So, have a good night, and see you all next week.